It had been raining for hours, that steady, bone-deep rain that makes the asphalt shine like glass. The kind that turns every reflection into something you almost recognize, something familiar yet wrong. I was driving alone, the wipers beating a dull rhythm against the windshield, thinking about nothing in particular, trying to shake off the exhaustion from a long week at work. The highway was almost empty, except for the occasional semi or the fleeting glow of a passing car. Everything felt muted, damp, and quiet, like the world had decided to hold its breath. I hadn't expected to see anyone at the side of the road. Not at this hour. But there he was, a man, or maybe just a shadow of one, standing under a flickering streetlight, thumb out. My first thought was caution. Of course, you hear all those stories, all those warnings about picking up strangers. And yet, for some reason, I felt drawn to him. Maybe it was the rain plastering his dark hair to his face, the way he shivered under the thin jacket he was wearing, soaked through, looking utterly lost. Something about him tugged at me, something I couldn't put a name to. I slowed the car as I passed, hesitation lacing my chest like ice. The man raised a hand, gesturing for me to stop. My hands tightened on the wheel. My heart had this odd rhythm, skipping and thudding all at once. I told myself I shouldn't, but I swerved to the shoulder, the tires hissing against the wet asphalt, and pulled over. He climbed in without a word, the car immediately feeling smaller, somehow heavier. I noticed his eyes first. They were dark, almost too dark, like someone had taken a piece of shadow and pressed it into their irises. He didn't smile. He didn't say hello. He just sat there, dripping rainwater onto my floor mats, and stared straight ahead. "Were you headed?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though my voice felt strange, like it belonged to someone else. He gave me an answer, but it was oddly precise, almost rehearsed. "Just down the road, a few exits past the old gas station." I nodded and pulled back onto the highway. The rain was relentless, and the sound of it pounding the roof, mixing with the hum of the tires on wet asphalt, made the car feel suspended in some other place, detached from a world. I stole glances at him through the rear-view mirror. He didn't look at me. He didn't even blink sometimes. He just stared straight ahead, that dark gaze fixed, unyielding. I tried small talk. I really did. "Crazy night out here, huh? Not many people on the road." He hummed something, low and quiet. Not a word, not even proper sound. Just a hum, and it made the hair on my neck stand up. It was wrong. Not like a stranger being awkward. Wrong in a way I couldn't name. We drove in silence for a while. I kept my speed down, not because I was worried about tickets, but because every instinct in me was on high alert. My mind kept scanning the highway, the dark trees lining both sides, the occasional flash of a road sign. I caught myself thinking about every horror story I'd ever heard about people disappearing on highways, strangers who weren't what they seemed. And then I laughed to myself, nervously, because that's what people do when fear curls in their stomachs like a living thing. I asked him more questions, about the weather, about the road, about whether he'd been driving far. Every answer was short, deliberate, and each time my stomach sank a little further. It wasn't the words themselves. It was the way he said them, flat, no inflection, no warmth. Just there, like a record player with some scratches in it, repeating, but wrong somehow. We passed the gas station he had mentioned, the lights reflected in the wet asphalt like broken glass. I slowed down. "Here's your exit," I said. He didn't move. He didn't acknowledge it. His eyes stayed on the dark highway ahead, his hands resting on his knees. I glanced at him, uneasy. "You want to pull over?" Finally, he turned to look at me, and for the briefest moment, I could see his face clearly in the dim interior light. Something about it was off, not exactly monstrous, but not right. The angles were just a little too sharp, the shadows in his eyes too deep. His lips twitched, not in a smile, not in a frown, just twitched, and then he said softly, "I'd rather you didn't." I swallowed hard, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. There was a pause, that pregnant pause where something unspoken hovered between us, filling the car with tension so thick I could taste it. I wanted to say something, anything, but my mouth felt dry and useless. Okay, I said finally. I'll keep going a little further. Just tell me when. He nodded slightly, and the car felt like it had exhaled with me, though I knew it hadn't. We drove on. The rain fell harder. The wipers moved frantically across the windshield, leaving long streaks of gray and silver. Each flash of headlights from an oncoming car felt like a heartbeat in the dark, too fast, too loud. I tried to focus on the road, on the sound of the tires slicing through puddles, but my mind kept drifting. I thought about every story of people vanishing on roads like this, about the ones whose bodies were found hours later, miles from where they should have been. I tried to tell myself he was just a person, wet, cold, alone, but there was a part of me, deep instinctive, that said this wasn't normal. He spoke again, almost whispering, almost drowned out by the rain. Ever feel like the road goes on forever? Like it's alive? I laughed nervously, glancing at him. Yeah, I guess. Long drives make you feel that way. But I didn't feel that way. Not really. I felt a creeping unease that climbed up my spine and settled in my chest, cold and hard. My pulse was loud in my ears. The rain outside seemed to press against the car, and I imagined shadows moving in the dark. Far ahead on the highway, the conversation slowed, the hum of the rain and the tires filling every space. I noticed small things. The way his jacket seemed to absorb the light, how the air in the car smelled faintly of wet earth, and something else I couldn't place. How his breathing didn't match mine, not even close. It was deliberate, controlled, like he was aware of everything I wasn't. And then I realized something. He hadn't asked a single question about me. Not one. Every conversation, every sound had been about him or nothing at all. My name never came up. My job, my life, my fears. And that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end because it felt purposeful. Finally, the highway curved, a gentle bend with a small shoulder under a dying streetlight. I slowed down, heart hammering. Here, I asked again, hoping for normalcy. He shook his head just a little. Keep going. A little farther. I like to ride a while. And I did. I drove. My knuckles ached. My eyes scanned the dark. The rain was relentless. The night unending. Every instinct in me screamed that this wasn't just a hitchhiker, that something about him wasn't human, or at least not entirely. And yet, I kept driving, because what else could I do? I was in his world now, caught in a rhythm I didn't understand, suspended between fear and curiosity. By the time we had driven another mile, I could barely remember a time when I was alone in the car. Every sound, the wipers, the rain, the tires, the faint hum he made, was amplified, echoing in my chest, and somewhere deep down, a tiny voice whispered that this night was far from over, that the road had only begun to show me its true shape. I sat there, staring at the empty passenger seat, listening to the faint sound of his footsteps fade into the blackness. The air felt colder. The silence was thicker than it had ever been. I want to call 911, to say something, to report a strange man on a deserted path. But my hands shook too much. My phone refused to connect, stuck in that endless searching loop just like the GPS. I started the car again, slowly, cautiously, and turned back onto the narrow path. My eyes scanned every shadow, every tree, every reflection in the wet asphalt. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed while he was out there, that the world itself had shifted, and I was no longer in control of the car, the road, or even of myself. By the time I finally reached the main highway again, the streetlights and familiar signs should have been comforting. They weren't. The turnoff, the path, the trees. They were burned into my mind in a way that no logical explanation could reach. I knew I would dream about that stretch of road, about him, about the impossible way the GPS and the phone refused to work. And I knew, deep down, that the road itself had watched me, and it wouldn't forget. I remember the way the headlights cut through the fog, that it started rolling in. Not the soft, harmless fog that hugs the ground, but a thick, heavy kind that feels like it's pressing against your skin. I'd been driving for what felt like hours, though my phone had no service, and the GPS still refused to work. The road twisted unnaturally in places, like it had grown overnight, and I could feel it pressing in on all sides. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, heart hammering, mind screaming at me that I needed to stop. But I couldn't stop. Not yet. It was then that I noticed the seat beside me. I'd been so focused on the road, so focused on the strange path, the thick trees, the shadows that seemed to move on their own, I hadn't really looked. And when I did, I noticed it. The seat was empty. I blinked twice, maybe 3 times. My heart skipped a beat. I turned slightly to check the rearview mirror. Nothing. No one. Not a shadow. Not a shape. Not a figure of any kind. Just the empty seat, soaked from the rain. A small puddle forming where he'd sat. My pulse shot up, and I grabbed the mirror tighter, scanning every angle. The back seat, empty. The windows, fogged. Nothing outside but the relentless drizzle and the black trees. Wait, I muttered to myself, voice shaking. You can't just... I swallowed hard, trying to calm myself. Maybe it slipped out while I was adjusting the mirror. Maybe it had gone for a walk, a prank, something stupid. I laughed, a short, hollow sound. A prank, I said. Yeah, that's it, just a prank. But it wasn't. I could feel it. That terrible, creeping certainty that settled over my chest like a weight. My eyes darted back to the asphalt, and then I saw them. Footprints, wet, glistening in the headlights. They started at the car door and led straight into the darkness. I could see them clearly, the deep impressions of shoes pressed into wet road. But the footprints, they didn't make sense. The spacing was wrong, uneven. It was as if the person who left them didn't move naturally, like they had floated and then planted themselves in patches along the pavement. I pressed the brake, though the car was already stopped. I leaned forward, squinting, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The prints went a short distance, and then nothing vanished into the fog, just disappeared. My hands shook so violently I had to grip the wheel to keep from dropping it. My brain tried to rationalize. Maybe the fog played tricks. Maybe my eyes were tired. Maybe it was some weird reflection of the headlights. I told myself all of that over and over, but I didn't believe it. I couldn't. The silence was unbearable. The car's engine hummed low, the wipers moving sporadically, the tires dripping mud, and nothing else. Not a sound of footsteps, not a cough, not a whisper, nothing. My chest tightened, and I realized I was holding my breath. My mind refused to stop turning over the possibilities, each one worse than the last. I tried to call 911. Of course, nothing. No signal. Just a faint static that crackled and hissed before fading into the void. I stared at the phone in disbelief, a cold, hollow dread settling over me. I wanted to scream, wanted to get out of the car, to run into the trees and see if he was there. But a part of me, a deep primal part, knew that if I stepped out, I'd vanish too, or worse. I leaned back, breathing hard, trying to calm my racing heart. I glanced again at the seat beside me. Empty, wet. The smell of rain and earth mingled with something else. Something faint, almost metallic. Copper, maybe. I shook my head. Focus. Focus. This is real. This is happening. And yet, it didn't feel like reality. I started driving again, slowly, cautiously, eyes darting to the mirrors and the road. Every shadow seemed heavier now. Every tree branch pressed against the sky like a claw. I tried to make sense of the footprints. They didn't lead to the forest. They didn't disappear into a ditch. They ended abruptly, right in the middle of the lane, like he had vanished into thin air. My thoughts spun faster and faster. Was this real? Was I losing my mind? Or had I been imagining the whole thing since I'd picked him up? Every instinct screamed that I wasn't imagining it, that the car, the road, and the fog had become something else, something alive, watching me, testing me. The further I drove, the thicker the fog became. The headlights barely penetrated it, and the road ahead seemed to stretch endlessly. I kept checking the mirrors, over and over, desperate for any sign of him. I even thought I saw a shadow in the distance once, just at the edge of the light, but when I blinked, it was gone. My stomach lurched. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following, or maybe I was following something. I tried to focus on the familiar, the sound of the wipers, the tires on wet asphalt, the steady rhythm of my heartbeat, but the world felt wrong. The path curved where it shouldn't. The trees leaned too far. The reflections in the puddles glimmered unnaturally. Every detail screamed that reality had shifted, just slightly, like a funhouse mirror bending everything I knew. I want to call someone. Anyone. My hands were trembling too much to hold the phone steady. But even if I had, the signal would have been gone. I was alone. Completely, impossibly alone. And yet I wasn't. I could feel him in the empty seat, in the footprints, in the silence pressing against the car. I remember a story I'd read once about people who vanish on lonely roads. They say the world shifts with them, bends, and the air itself becomes a trap. You drive, you walk, you move, but the world moves too, faster, just ahead of you, and you're always lost. I told myself it was just a story, but sitting there, gripping the wheel, staring at the fog and the asphalt, I realized that maybe some stories were true. Maybe some of them had meant to warn me. The night stretched on. I can't tell you how long I drove. Hours? Minutes? Time felt like it had stopped. I kept scanning the rear-view mirror, the empty seat, the road behind me. Every time I blinked, I half expected him to reappear. And each time, I felt that sick, sinking realization. He wasn't going to come back. Not really. Not in any way I could see. Eventually, the fog thinned just slightly, and I saw a faint glow in the distance. Headlights? A street lamp? Maybe another car? Relief surged through me, but it was hollow. The footprints, the vanishing, the way the air had shifted. Those things weren't gone. They were inside me now, etched into my memory, into the rhythm of my heartbeat, into the way I breathed. I slowed as the road leveled out. The seat beside me remained wet, empty. The footprints didn't follow me. They weren't there anymore, but the unease lingered. The world felt altered, wrong, and I knew, deep down, that no explanation would make it right. No rational thought could erase what I'd seen or what I felt. I reached a familiar stretch of highway, where the fog finally lifted enough to see the signs and the guardrails. My hands were shaking, body tense, mind screaming for logic, for reason. But even as the familiar markers passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that the world had changed, that the road, the fog, and him, whatever he was, had left a mark. I wanted to pull over, to breathe, to make sense of everything. But the fear was clinging too tightly, pressing down, refusing to let go. I drove on, aware that I would never forget this night. The seat, the footprints, the vanishing, it wasn't just something that happened. It was a warning, a lesson, a taste of reality that bent for certain people, certain strangers, certain moments. And as the city lights appeared in the distance, as the first signs of civilization glimmered through the fog, I realized that nothing would ever feel the same again. I had been alone with something that didn't belong. Something that could vanish and leave only a trace in the rain. Something that could exist in the empty space beside me without being seen, without needing to speak, without needing to be understood. I drove on, hands still white on the wheel, eyes fixed on the road, heart hammering. And I knew in that moment that I would never pick up another stranger on a rainy night. Not ever. Because some people, some things, aren't meant to ride with you. And some roads, some nights, don't let you go once they've touched you. I drove on, hands gripping the wheel until my knuckles ached, heart hammering in a rhythm I could feel in my teeth. The road stretched ahead, slick with rain, glinting like some black mirror under the headlights. My chest still ached in the panic, my mind racing over every impossible moment of the night. The way he had vanished, the footprints that ended in nothing, the fog that seemed to thicken around the car itself. I needed someone to tell me this wasn't real. Someone to tell me I wasn't losing my mind. My phone, of course. I dug it out of my pocket, shaking, hands slick with sweat. I fumbled with the buttons, heart pounding so loud I thought it might drown out the rain. Dialing 911 felt like the only rational thing left to do, the only tether to reality. The line clicked, a crackle of static, then a voice distorted, barely human through the interference. 911, what's your emergency? I swallowed hard, trying to force my voice steady. I picked up a hitchhiker on Highway 47. He vanished. He was sitting in my car, and then he disappeared. There are footprints, wet footprints, but they just end. I don't know where he went. I don't know if he's hurt. Please, someone help me. The voice was calm, but the static made it sound eerie, like it was coming from a place far away. Highway 47, can you confirm your location? I glanced at the signs as they flashed by in the headlights. I think I'm near mile marker 19, but there was a pause. Just static, then a sharp, clipped tone. We've had a report a body has been found, miles from your location. Matches the description you provided. Male, mid-20s, soaked from rain, wearing a dark jacket. No signs of struggle. No identification. Estimated time of death, within the last 15 minutes. My throat went dry. I could barely breathe. 15 minutes? That was impossible. I had been with him for at least an hour. At least. My hands shook so violently that I had to grip the wheel with both fists. No, that can't be right. He was in my car. 15 minutes? I've been driving. He was alive. He was right here. Another pause. Just static, then the voice low and steady. We're receiving the information from dispatch. Are you certain of the details you're providing? I don't know what to say. I yelled, the words cracking. He was in my car. He got in at the gas station, at the turnoff. I drove with him. I talked to him. He was alive. There was a long silence, just the static crackling in my ear. And then a voice, quieter, almost hesitant, came through. Sir, we are showing the body was found at mile marker 32. That's approximately 15 minutes ago. How are you calling now? My stomach dropped. My hands fell limp from the wheel for a moment. I gripped it again, knuckles white, head spinning. 15 minutes. Mile marker 32. But I had been at mile marker 19, at least I thought I had. I glanced at the road signs flashing past the headlights. The numbers strange and wrong. Had I miscounted? Had the road somehow shifted? No, that made no sense. Roads don't shift. And yet, my mind couldn't ignore the nagging, horrifying possibility. Sir, are you still there? The operator asked. I don't understand. He was in my car. He vanished. There were footprints. My voice caught. I couldn't finish. I felt nauseous. My mind was scrambling for an explanation. Sleep deprivation? Stress? Rain? Fog? I clutched the wheel tighter, white-knuckled, my pulse drumming in my ears. The static hissed again. Then another voice, one I hadn't noticed before, whispered something almost unintelligible. I thought I heard my own name, my actual name. The hair on my arm stood up. Hello? Sir? Are you okay? I don't know. I said, panic clawing at me. I don't know what's happening. I don't know where he is. Please help me. There was another long pause, almost unbearable, the static filling every space. And then the operator's voice returned, calm, distant, impossibly calm. Sir, if you are with him, he cannot be alive. We have a body, and you have just described him perfectly. We need you to stay where you are. Emergency services are en route. I felt my stomach twist, cold and heavy. I looked at the empty passenger seat again. Wet, empty, the footprints gone, the car quiet, save for the rain and the engine hum. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I felt my knees go weak, slumping slightly in the driver's seat. Wait, I whispered. If he's dead, then how? I couldn't finish the sentence. I couldn't even think it fully. My brain kept trying to stitch the impossible together. I had driven with him, talked to him, watched him. 15 minutes ago, according to dispatch, he was already dead. How could that be? The fog, the road, the footprints, everything suddenly seemed unreal. Every detail of the night, every twist of the road, every strange twitch of his lips. It all warped into something impossible. The operator spoke again, almost softly. Sir, it's important you stay calm. Can you describe what you last saw? Anything unusual? I tried to focus, forcing the words out. He disappeared. He was sitting in the seat, and then nothing, wet footprints, just for a moment, and then they vanished. I don't know where he went. I don't know if I imagined it, but I saw him. My voice broke. I saw him. There was silence on the line for what felt like an eternity. Static hiss like a whisper in my ear. And then another voice, far off, low and hesitant, spoke. Some people are not meant to exist in the same space as you. If you are seeing him, you may have encountered something impossible. Impossible. My stomach churned, my heart hammering, my pulse in my ears. I repeated the word to myself, impossible, impossible, impossible. And yet every nerve in me screamed that it had happened, that I had seen him, that I had driven him, talked to him, and watched him vanish, that the world had warped around me in a way I couldn't understand. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was a twin, someone identical. No, that didn't explain the footprints, the way he had spoken, the impossibility of time. Maybe I had gone insane for a moment, a fleeting hallucination from stress or exhaustion. No, too real, too solid. I could still feel the weight of his presence in the car, the way the seat had felt pressed down as if someone had been there, breathing, alive. I wanted to hang up. I wanted to drive. I wanted to escape this night and never think about it again. But a voice, my own, trembling, kept me on the line. The operator's static-filled voice reminded me that help, in some way, was coming. That somewhere, someone understood this, though perhaps not fully. "Sir, are you still with us?" "Yes," I whispered. I'm still here. I don't know what to do." "Stay where you are. We're sending someone to check the area. Remain calm and do not attempt to follow or chase anything you believe you saw. Understand?" I nodded, though I knew they couldn't see me. I nodded anyway. I gripped the wheel tightly, eyes fixed on the foggy road ahead. Every instinct screamed that I had crossed a boundary I couldn't understand, that the world had shifted and I had driven right through it. The rain, the fog, the road, the car, the empty seat. They all whispered the same thing. The night had changed, and I had been touched by something beyond explanation. The line went quiet, leaving only the static. I set the phone down on the seat, hands trembling, chest tight. I stared out the windshield, trying to make sense of the road, the fog, the headlights. My mind kept replaying the footprints, the vanishing, the impossible timing. 15 minutes, a body, miles away, and me, driving him, talking to him, watching him disappear. I breathed in slowly, shakily, trying to ground myself. Try to remember that the world outside the car still existed, that the highway still led somewhere, that I could keep moving forward. But everything felt altered, distorted. I couldn't shake the knowledge that I had touched something impossible, that I had been part of something I wasn't meant to understand. Hours, or maybe minutes, passed as I drove, phone forgotten in my lap, eyes scanning the fog, ears straining for any sign of life, any sound of footsteps, any movement that could explain the impossible. But the seat remained empty. The footprints were gone. And yet, the memory of him, the way he had existed in the car, remained pressing against my mind, pressing against the night, pressing against reality itself. I knew, as I drove through the thick fog and rain, that I would never forget this night, that no explanation, no rational thought, number 911 call, could erase what had happened. And I knew, with a sinking certainty, that some things on the road, some encounters, some people, were not meant to be understood, only survived. I had been driving for hours, the night stretching ahead like an endless ribbon of asphalt. The fog rolled in slowly at first, a thin veil that clung to the trees and the guardrails. But then it thickened, thicker than I've ever seen, swallowing the road ahead, muffling the hum of my tires, and turning every ordinary shape into something strange and unknowable. The headlights barely cut through it, just pale slices of light fading into gray. I could feel the dampness in the air, heavy and wet, pressing against the windshield and settling in my lungs with every breath. It smelled of wet earth, pine needles, and something faintly metallic I couldn't place. I turned the heater up, but it did nothing to shake the chill crawling up my spine. Something about the fog made the night feel alive, like it was watching me, listening, waiting. That's when I saw it. At first, it was just a shadow, barely distinguishable in the gray. A dark shape standing on the side of the road, or maybe in the middle. I blinked, shook my head, and tried to convince myself it was a trick of the headlights. Trees? A road sign? anything ordinary. But as I drove closer, the shape moved. A step, then another, slow, deliberate, almost gliding across the road. I slammed on the brakes, hard hammering, the tires squealing softly on the wet asphalt. My stomach dropped, and my hands gripped the wheel until my knuckles ached. I leaned forward, squinting through the fog. The figure didn't run, didn't flinch, just stood there, dark, featureless, watching me. I told myself to breathe. It's probably someone walking along the road, lost, or maybe a hitchhiker, though the hour made that unlikely. But the way it moved, it was wrong. Too smooth, too deliberate, like it wasn't bound by the rules of the world. I considered turning around, going back the way I came, but the fog had rolled in behind me as well, stretching endlessly, swallowing the road. It was like a tunnel of gray, and the exit, or any sign of civilization, was gone. I had no choice but to move forward. Slowly, cautiously, I inched the car closer. The figure shifted again, stepping into the faint beam of my headlights. My stomach turned. It looked human at first, but then I noticed the angles. Too tall, too thin, arms hanging slightly too long. The head tilted at an impossible angle, and I could swear it wasn't blinking. I swallowed hard. My mouth went dry, but I forced a laugh, quiet, weak, to steady myself. Okay, just someone walking, I muttered. Nothing more. Just someone walking. The headlights flickered. Just a brief flicker, enough to make me panic. And when they came back, the figure was gone. Vanished. Not running, not hiding, just gone. My pulse spiked, and I checked the mirrors. Empty. Nothing behind me. Nothing in the fog. I tried to rationalize. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks. Maybe the fog had warped the shadows, made the branches bend like limbs. But my gut told me otherwise. Something had been there. Something had moved in a way no human could. I kept driving, slowly, eyes darting from shadow to shadow. Every tree looked like it could lunge. Every curve in the road could hide it. The fog wrapped around the car, dense and unyielding, making familiar shapes strange and threatening. I realized I could barely see more than a few feet ahead, and the road markings were nearly invisible, slick and shining from the rain earlier in the evening. My mind raced with memories of stories I'd read about fog-related accidents, about people who vanished on lonely roads. I shook my head, trying to focus on the wheel, the tires, the hum of the engine. Keep moving, I told myself. Just keep moving. But the fog was relentless. It seemed to pulse with the car, stretching and shifting, hiding curves, erasing signs, hiding exits. I felt trapped. The longer I drove, the more certain I became that the road itself had changed, or that I had entered a part of it that didn't belong to the world I knew. Then I heard something. A faint sound, barely above the hum of the tires, like a whisper brushing against my ear. I turned, expecting to see movement outside the windows, maybe a branch swaying. Nothing. Just fog, just the headlights cutting slices through gray. The whisper came again, just a little louder. I strained to listen, trying to tell if it was a trick of the wind, the way the fog pressed against the car, or something else entirely. My pulse hammered in my ears. I couldn't decide if I wanted to stop or run faster. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being observed, followed, measured. Then the headlights flickered again. A cold dread slithered through me as I realized the shape had returned. Not in the road, not directly ahead, but in the periphery, watching, waiting. I could see its silhouette moving just at the edge of my vision, and when I blinked, it was gone again. I forced myself to breathe, slow and deliberate. My hands shook, gripping the wheel tightly. Every instinct screamed to get out of the fog, to escape the shape, to run back to a place with streetlights, houses, other people. But the fog had closed around me like a wall. The highway I knew so well had become unrecognizable. I tried to focus on the familiar, anything that could anchor me. The hum of the tires, the flash of the wipers, the faint smell of damp asphalt. But nothing worked. The shape lingered in my mind, filling every corner with dread. The way it moved, the impossibility of its angles, the eerie stillness when it paused. It all felt wrong. I imagined what it would be like if someone saw me like this, if someone could see my panic from above. I felt exposed like the fog and the road, and the shadows themselves were aware of me, aware of my fear, and feeding on it. My pulse quickened, and I forced myself to focus on the headlights, cutting a path through the gray, 1 foot in front of the other, 1 mile at a time. But the figure didn't leave. It slipped between trees, hovered at the edges of visibility, always just beyond the range of comprehension. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of light, fog, and exhaustion. My rational mind grasped for explanations. But deep down I knew it wasn't rational. I knew I wasn't imagining it. And then the headlights flickered once more. This time, when they returned, the road was clear. No figure, no shadow, just fog, stretching endlessly ahead, thick and unyielding. My relief was immediate, but hollow. I knew it hadn't gone. Not really. I could feel it in the air, a presence just outside the boundaries of sight, waiting for me to let my guard down. I slowed, glancing at the mirrors. Nothing. Empty. Normal. The fog made everything gray, muted, impossible to see clearly. And yet, I could feel it. Something watching, following, shifting with me. The road felt alive. The trees seemed to lean in. The wind, the faintest movement through the branches, whisper a warning I couldn't quite place. I pressed the accelerator lightly, moving faster, desperate to get past this stretch, desperate to reach something familiar. Every shadow, every curve in the road made me flinch. Every flicker of headlights or reflection in a puddle made me think the figure had returned. My chest was tight, my hands shaking, my mind screaming for reason. But the road didn't end. The fog didn't relent. And the shape never fully disappeared from my thoughts. I knew, somehow, that the figure had marked the road, marked me, that it wasn't gone, just waiting for the next curve, the next moment, the next lapse in attention, hours or maybe minutes, pass in that fog, in that gray, in that impossible stretch of highway. I don't know how long I drove. I don't know if I ever truly left it behind. But I remember the fear, thick and heavy, like the dampness in the air. I remember the way the headlights flickered, the way the shadow moved, and the way the fog seemed to close in around me, alive, breathing, patient. And I remember one thing clearly. When the fog rolls in, when it thickens and swallows the road, you're never truly alone. Something waits. Something watches. And when it moves, you may not even realize it has passed until you feel it in the empty spaces around you. I kept driving, though I wasn't sure where. The fog had swallowed the road completely, leaving me in a tunnel of gray that pressed against a windshield and seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. My hands were still white on the wheel, every nerve on edge from the figure I glimpsed or imagined on the road. My pulse was hammering, my stomach twisted. I forced myself to focus on the headlights, the tires, the wet asphalt, anything that could anchor me to reality. The radio crackled to life. I hadn't touched it, hadn't even thought to turn it on, but there it was. That static, that low, humming buzz that filled the car made my teeth ache. Then a voice, calm but urgent, began reporting an accident. Attention drivers on Highway 47. Multiple vehicles involved in a crash near mile marker 21. Injuries reported. Emergency crews en route. I froze. Mile marker 21. That was ahead of me, just a few miles. My stomach dropped. I scanned the fog for signs of danger. The broken taillights of vehicles, the glow of flashing emergency lights. But there was nothing, just the same gray fog and wet asphalt stretching ahead, empty and silent. I tried to tell myself it was old news, a delayed report, but the voice continued. Witnesses describe a red sedan spinning into a ditch. No fatalities reported at this time. Drivers are advised to use caution. A cold sweat broke out along my spine. A red sedan. My mind snapped to the car I had just passed, a few minutes ago, though time felt warped in the fog. I shook my head. It couldn't be me. I hadn't even gone that far yet. Another report followed. Another incident reported. Approximately 2 miles from the first crash, a pickup truck collided with a guardrail. Injuries unknown. Police on scene. I pressed my hands to my face, breathing fast, trying to make sense of it. My own heartbeat felt loud, rattling in my ears. I turned the volume down, but the voice persisted, alternating with static, repeating incidents that didn't make sense. Each report was ahead of me on the road, each one seeming to happen before I could reach the locations. I gripped the wheel tighter. What kind of radio broadcast predicts accidents? What kind of world is that? My rational mind screamed at me. Delayed report, wrong mile markers, coincidence. But the irrational part, the part clawing at my chest, whispered something darker. This was happening. This was real. The road itself was changing, bending, mocking me. I remembered the last time I'd listened to a weather or traffic report, the sense of reassurance it had given me, and now it was the opposite. It was a countdown, a warning, a record of events that hadn't yet occurred. Each report made my anxiety spike. Each incident described cars spinning, collisions, people thrown into the mud or trees. I felt a queasy, hollow dread twist in my gut. The fog seemed to pulse in time with the reports, thickening and then thinning as if reacting to each word. I could barely see a few feet ahead. Every shadow could be a vehicle about to swerve into my path. Every reflection in a puddle could be a warning I wasn't prepared for. Another broadcast. Red SUV traveling southbound lost control, spun into a tree. Witnesses report screams. Emergency response underway. I glanced at the mirrors. Empty. No lights, no movement, nothing. My heart hammered so violently I thought it might burst. The radio seemed to whisper, hissing in static and voice, telling a story that hadn't happened yet, but would. Maybe in minutes, maybe seconds, and all I could do was drive. Keep driving. Keep my eyes on the road, hoping, praying, that the fog didn't conceal the next incident that I had already been told was coming. My hands shook. The wheel felt heavy, almost alive. I thought about pulling over, stopping, waiting for the fog to lift, waiting for clarity. But the reports wouldn't stop. They would continue with or without me. And the longer I thought about it, the more I realized that stopping might not help. The world itself had bent into something I didn't understand. Time had lost its linear shape. The road and the fog and the radio were speaking a language I wasn't supposed to understand. Another report, faster now. Highway 47, near mile marker 25. White van overturned. Witnesses report bodies on the asphalt. Emergency crews arriving. Drivers advised to avoid the area. I felt my stomach turn over. Bodies on the asphalt. And yet, as I drove, I saw nothing. Just fog. The asphalt glistening wet. The headlights illuminating gray shapes that disappeared when I blinked. My mind wanted desperately to rationalize it. Maybe these were echoes, fragments of a traffic alert feed that had malfunctioned. Maybe the reports were old and being replayed. Maybe I was hallucinating. But I wasn't hallucinating. I could feel the anxiety rising, thick and heavy, coiling in my chest. It was as if the road itself had drawn me into its rhythm, forcing me to listen to the story of its violence and chaos before it happened. I imagined every car spinning, every tire screeching. Every scream echoed the fog and found its way to me. Another report. Another collision reported, southbound near mile marker 27. Multiple injuries, one fatality. Witnesses say the fog made visibility nearly impossible. I froze, gripping the wheel so hard I could feel my knuckles cracking. Visibility impossible. That was exactly what I was experiencing. My mind flailed. How could the radio know? How could it predict these crashes? My chest tightened. I felt trapped in the car, trapped in the fog, trapped in a timeline that didn't obey the rules I understood. I tried to focus on the headlights, on the painted lines glistening in the rain, on the wipers swiping rhythmically across the windshield. I tried to anchor myself in reality, but each time I glanced at the side mirrors, each time I thought I saw the road ahead, something seemed off. The shapes were wrong. The shadows moved differently, and the fog seemed thicker in places it shouldn't be. Another report, more rapid now, almost frantic. Highway 47, mile marker 29. Red sedan overturned. Witnesses report smoke and fire. Emergency services on scene. I felt bile rise in my throat. Red sedan. Again. Was it the same car? My own. My brain screamed at me to pull over, to escape the road, to get away from the predictions that seemed to follow me. but the fog pressed in on all sides. I couldn't see beyond it. There was no turning back, no stopping, only moving forward. My mind started racing, trying to make sense of the impossible. Maybe this road, maybe something was wrong with this stretch of highway. Maybe the fog wasn't natural. Maybe it was part of something else. A trick, a trap. My pulse surged. Every instinct screamed to escape, but my body refused to act. I was frozen in motion, driving along a path that seemed to unfold according to some unseen script, narrated by the static-filled radio voice. Another report, distorted, broken by static. Emergency responders on scene, multiple fatalities, cause under investigation. Drivers are advised. I cut the radio off with a trembling hand. Silence. Pure, heavy silence. But the panic didn't lift. The anxiety, that tight, coiling, hollow feeling, remained. The fog had not lifted. The road stretched ahead, dark, slick, unknown. And I knew, deep down, that the reports hadn't been wrong. They weren't accidents that hadn't happened yet. They were warnings, hints, glimpses of something I could not avoid. I gripped the wheel and forced myself to breathe, shallow and quick, trying to slow the rhythm of my racing mind. I kept my eyes on the lines of the road, the glistening reflections, the faint shapes that might be trees or guardrails or something else. Every instinct screamed that I was being tested, measured, that the fog and the road and the radio were part of something beyond comprehension. And somewhere deep in the back of my mind, the fear settled like ice that I wasn't just a driver on a foggy night. I was a witness to a timeline I didn't understand, a path I couldn't escape, a story of accidents that existed somewhere between what had happened and what would happen, and that I had been pulled into it, unable to leave, unable to stop, unable to turn back. I pressed my foot down a little harder on the accelerator, desperate to put distance between myself and the last stretch of fog where the accidents had been reported. My hands were still trembling, knuckles white, heart hammering as if it wanted to escape my chest. The headlights barely cut through the thick gray, and the road ahead seemed to twist and bend unnaturally, like it had grown teeth in the night, snapping at my tires. I told myself I just needed to drive, to stay calm, to focus, but the instinct to turn back clawed at my mind. I tried to take the exit I thought I knew, the one that would lead me back to the familiar part of the highway, the exit with the diner, the gas station, the small town I could recognize. I turned the wheel sharply, following the sign that emerged briefly from the fog. But when I glanced ahead a few seconds later, the road curved unnaturally and the exit was gone. Gone. I blinked, disbelief mixing with panic. I turned again, tried to retrace my path. But every sign that I thought I remembered was twisted, the numbers and letters melting into fog. I could see faint shapes, trees, guardrails, the occasional marker, but they were wrong. Wrong angles, wrong spacing, wrong everything. It was as if the highway had rearranged itself while I wasn't looking, folding over and doubling back, hiding the exits and stretching the distance between markers. My pulse quickened. I tried to stay rational. Maybe I'd taken a wrong turn earlier, missed a mile marker, misremembered the layout. But deep down I knew this wasn't just a mistake. The highway was different, alive, somehow and aware of me. It had trapped me inside its loop, and the fog had become its instrument, hiding the familiar, hiding the safe, hiding the way out. I slowed, gripping the wheel as if my life depended on it, which it probably did. I strained my eyes, trying to pierce the gray, searching for anything recognizable. A sign, a curve, a light from a distant car. But everything blended together in the mist, and I could barely tell which way I'd come or which way I was going. Every turn felt like it had been laid out to disorient me, to pull me further into the fog's embrace. I thought about stopping, putting the car in park, and just sitting, letting my mind catch up, letting the fog pass. But the air felt thick, oppressive, like it was pressing against my chest. The road hummed beneath me, wet asphalt glinting, and the thought that something or someone might be waiting just beyond the visibility made my hands tighten on the wheel again. I couldn't stop. Not yet. I tried to retrace the last mile, remembering the curve that had led me past the red sedan, the one from the accident report on the radio, the one that hadn't happened yet, but somehow had. I turned the wheel where I thought I remembered the curve, and my stomach dropped. The road didn't curve the way I expected. It stretched straight ahead, slick and shining, and the exit I had aimed for vanished completely. I slammed on the brakes, tires squealing, and leaned forward, eyes straining into the gray. My chest tightened with a sudden wave of panic. Every instinct screamed that I had driven past the same stretch of road multiple times, that the highway had looped, twisted, doubled back on itself while I wasn't paying attention. I was trapped in a circuit, a never-ending stretch of fog and asphalt that refused to let me go. My mind raced. I tried to remember any landmarks, anything that could anchor me. There had been a tree on the left, a guardrail bent near the edge, a patch of mud where a car had skidded last week. But when I searched for them now, nothing matched. Everything was off by inches, by feet, by angles that my brain could barely comprehend. The fog had erased familiarity. It had stolen orientation. I was completely, impossibly lost. I felt a shiver creep down my spine. The thought hit me like ice. What if I had been driving in circles this entire time? What if the world outside the car had shifted while I wasn't looking, and the fog was all that remained reality? Every mile marker, every curve, every sign that I had trusted had been swallowed by the mist, replaced with something foreign, something designed to confuse me, to trap me. I tried to slow my breathing, forcing myself to focus on the road. The wipers squeaked against the glass as they swept the condensation away. Every droplet refracted the headlights, fracturing the gray into strange patterns that my mind insisted were moving shapes. Shadows shifted in the periphery, impossible, ambiguous, and I felt eyes, maybe mine, maybe not, following me from the edge of the mist. I wanted to convince myself I was imagining it, that exhaustion and stress were twisting the familiar into nightmare. But I knew that whatever I was seeing or not seeing was real enough to affect me, real enough to make my heart pound and my knuckles white, real enough to make me doubt everything I thought I knew about this road, about the world, about time itself. I pressed the accelerator, moving faster, desperate for anything familiar. The fog thickened with every mile, rolling like a tide, suffocating the headlights, swallowing the road ahead. The exit signs, the reflective markers, the familiar curves, all gone. Every turn led me deeper into gray. I began to feel dizzy, like the car itself was spinning or the world around it. I glanced in the rearview mirror. The faint shapes of trees and guardrails blurred and shifted. For a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing on the side of the road. The shadowy shape from before, perhaps, or a new one, or maybe my own panic manifesting. When I blinked, nothing. Just fog. Endless, consuming fog. I tried to focus on something tangible. The speedometer. The tires on the wet asphalt. The hum of the engine. Anything that could anchor me. But the road had lost its logic. Curves appeared where none should exist. Miles stretched in seconds. The sense of direction slipped through my fingers like smoke. I felt as though I was moving, but nowhere at all. I want to call someone to report that I was lost, that the road had changed, that the fog had consumed everything familiar. But my phone had no signal. Static only, like the world itself had cut me off, isolated me, left me in the gray. I was alone in a highway that refused to obey the rules, trapped in a loop I couldn't escape. A faint light flickered ahead, and I thought for a moment it might be another vehicle, a rescue, someone else on the road. I squinted, heart lifting slightly, only to realize it was a reflection, a trick of the wet asphalt and the fog. My chest sank. The hope had been fleeting, cruel. There was nothing, only me, the car, the fog, and the unending, looping road. I tried to turn, to retrace my path, to follow any sequence that might lead me back. But the road resisted, curves appearing where straightaways should be, exits vanishing when I expected them. Mile markers lying in wait to confuse and terrify. My sense of time had fractured. I had no idea how long I'd been driving. Minutes? Hours? My anxiety twisted in my stomach, like a live thing. And then I felt it. Not in the mirrors, not in the fog, not on the road, but deep in my chest, a cold certainty. I wasn't alone. Something moved with me. Something patient, watching, waiting. Not a shape, not a shadow, just a presence. I could feel it brushing against my awareness, threading to the fog, following the loops and curves, calculating unhurried. I pressed the accelerator harder, trying to escape, though I didn't know what I was escaping from. The car surged forward, cutting to the fog, but the loops continued. Each turn brought me back to places I thought I had already passed. Familiar landmarks, or what I remembered as familiar, reappeared twisted wrong, unrecognizable. My hands ached on the wheel, my chest burned, my brain screamed for logic in a world that refused to offer any. And in that moment, a terrifying clarity hit me. The fog wasn't just a weather phenomenon. The highway wasn't just asphalt and paint. They were alive in a way I couldn't understand, in a way that didn't obey rules. And I was inside it, caught in its endless, looping pulse, a single human heart struggling against a landscape that could bend time, space, and insanity itself. I drove on, eyes wide, hands gripping the wheel, pulse hammering. The fog stretched endlessly, the curves never ending, exits vanishing as if they had never existed. I was lost, completely, impossibly lost. And somewhere, beyond sight, beyond understanding, something waited, patient, eternal, shaping the highway into a trap from which I might never escape. I thought I could escape the fog by focusing on the road, but the moment I tried to quiet my mind, the radio crackled to life. I hadn't touched it, and yet the static rose, loud and abrasive, filling the car with a hiss that made my teeth ache. My pulse spiked. I fumbled for the volume knob, but the sound only grew louder, more insistent. Then the voice came distorted, like it had traveled through miles of broken wires before reaching me. 911! 911 emergency, help! It stuttered, fragmented by static. My heart slammed against my ribs. I recognized that tone, the one that always meant someone was in real trouble, but it wasn't human anymore. It was wrong, warped, as if it was being dragged from different times, places, lives. I clutched the wheel, knuckles white. What is this? I whispered to myself. The road stretched ahead, gray, wet, impossible. The fog pressed against the car, heavy and alive, and the voice on the radio seemed to seep into the fog itself, mingling with it. Fire, accident, need assistance. 911, the words repeated, overlapping, echoing, sometimes backward, sometimes fast, sometimes slow. I couldn't make sense of it. I tried to adjust the dial, hoping to find normal radio stations, music, something familiar, but the static followed, relentless. Then it changed, amid the static. I thought I heard a scream, a woman's voice, terrified, pleading, "Help me! Please, anyone!" My stomach clenched. The voice came again, but this time I recognized it. I had heard it before, months ago, when I had been driving late at night on another highway, listening to a news report about a car accident. The same tone, the same inflection. But that woman, she had been dead, killed in the crash. I froze, heart hammering. My hands gripped the wheel, as if holding on could somehow tether me to sanity. The fog seemed to thicken, curling around the headlights, hiding the road, hiding the familiar signs, hiding any possibility of escape. And through it, the radio continued, blending past and present. Cries of emergency intertwined with report of accidents I had not seen yet. Cries of people I had never met, shouting over static in a chaotic symphony. Emergency mile marker 23, collision, trapped, help. The voice repeated, looping, overlaid with another. A child's voice this time, faint, terrified, calling out a name I didn't recognize, a name I felt I should know. My chest tightened. Every instinct screamed at me to turn off the radio, to flee, to escape the car entirely. But the static clung to the edges of my mind, worming its way in, refusing to let me think clearly. I tried to rationalize. It was interference. Old tapes, weather patterns, some strange glitch. But my rational mind was slipping. The radio wasn't just broken. It was alive, shifting, blurring the line between now and then. Past emergencies melded into the present. A distorted record that I was somehow trapped inside. Another voice came, deeper, slower, repeating numbers, coordinates I couldn't recognize. Mile marker 21, casualties, mile marker 25, injuries. The voices overlapped, layering over each other, shouting over cries, screams, sirens. nothing aligning. My stomach lurched. I wanted to pull over, but the fog didn't allow it. The road stretched endlessly, curving and bending in ways that made no sense. Every familiar exit had vanished. Every landmark was swallowed. I reached out, hands shaking, trying to switch the radio off. But the dial spun uselessly, refusing to click. My breathing was rapid, shallow, and I felt sweat prickling my neck, cold and sticky. The cries on the radio grew louder, more frantic. I couldn't tell if they were real or echoes, if they were memories or warnings, if they were past or future. Then I heard something else, my own voice, faint, distorted, coming through the static. Help! Help me! I froze. My stomach twisted. It couldn't be. I hadn't called 911 yet. Hadn't even imagined the words. And yet there it was, my voice, pleading, echoing to the speakers, blending with all the other cries, blending with the fog, blending with my own rising panic. I slammed my hand against the dial, and for a moment, the static died down, but the relief was short-lived. Another voice emerged, calm, cold, robotic in a way that set my teeth on edge. Driver, lost, emergency. It repeated over and over like a mantra. And beneath it, the distorted screams persisted, layering over each other, making my skull ache. I pressed the accelerator, desperate to escape, to leave the fog, the static, the road behind. But the headlights only revealed more gray, more twists in the asphalt, more curves that should not exist. The radio, impossibly, followed me, the cries merging with the hiss of the tires on wet pavement, making it impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. I tried to remember the last thing that had felt normal, a gas station, a street light, a sign for a town, but the fog had swallowed it all. Everything familiar had been erased. My mind struggled to cling to reality, but the radio and the fog worked together to strip it away, leaving me raw and exposed, trembling, suspended in a nightmare that refused to end. Another report crackled through, impossibly precise, impossibly immediate. Mile marker 27, collision, 1 fatality. Emergency response underway. I knew that mile marker. I had passed it, or had I? My stomach twisted. Time was bending. The road was bending. The fog and the radio were bending everything I thought I knew. I reached for the phone, but there was no signal. Only the radio, only static, only cries that layered the present with the past, the real with the impossible. I couldn't call anyone. I couldn't report what was happening. I could only drive, trapped on this twisting, looping, fog-shrouded stretch of highway, my own fear echoing back at me through distorted voices. I thought of stopping, pulling over, waiting for the fog to pass, waiting for sanity to return. But the radio wouldn't let me. It whispered, shouted, cried, layered over my thoughts until I couldn't think clearly. And I realized something worse. I wasn't hearing the world. The world was hearing me, too. And it was waiting, patient, watching my panic feed into the static, feeding itself on my terror. Then a new voice emerged, calm, almost gentle in contrast to screams. You shouldn't be here. It was neither male nor female, neither alive nor fully dead. It resonated through the static, through the fog, through my bones. I swallowed hard, heart hammering. I couldn't respond. Words wouldn't come. My voice had left me, replaced by the echoing chorus of past emergencies and cries that had never been meant for me to hear. I gripped the wheel, eyes wide, hand shaking. The fog pressed closer, thick and suffocating, and the radio followed, unrelenting. I felt as if the car itself had been swallowed by the world, and all that remained was me, the headlights cutting meaningless slices into the gray, and the distorted cries looping endlessly, filling the air, filling my mind, filling the night. Minutes or hours passed. I couldn't tell. The cries never stopped. The distorted 911 messages blended seamlessly with sirens, with my own heartbeat, with whispers I couldn't locate. Every sense was under siege. The road had become a corridor of sound, sight, and dread, feeding into each other, looping, unyielding. And then, for a brief, terrifying instant, I thought I saw shapes moving outside the car. Shadows, faces, people reaching, screaming, bent and twisted in ways that were impossible. And for a split second, I thought one of the shapes was me. reflected in the fog, reflected in the static, screaming to the radio, trapped forever in the endless emergency reports. I pressed the accelerator, tried to escape, but the road, the fog, the radio, they didn't obey. Everything moved in loops, repeating, layering, a nightmare that had no beginning and no end. My hand shook violently, chest tight, mind screaming for relief, for reason, for an anchor to reality. But none came. Only the distorted cries, only the static, only the thick, unyielding gray that pressed against the headlights and whispered that I was trapped, a witness to emergencies that happened, were happening, and would happen again, endlessly, impossibly, all at once. I gripped the wheel until my fingers ached. My pulse raced, my stomach churned. The fog rolled on, thick and patient, and the radio shrieked and whispered and cried. I was alone, and yet I was surrounded by voices, by ghosts, by the impossible looping of time and sound. And in that moment, I understood that some roads, some nights, some radio frequencies are not meant to be survived, only endured. The fog lifted slowly, almost imperceptibly, as if it had been holding its breath and finally exhaled. One moment, the world was gray, suffocating, endless. The next, the night revealed itself, dark and still, but mercifully ordinary. The headlights cut through clear air. The asphalt shimmered wet but intact. The familiar curve of the highway appeared ahead. My chest loosened, and for the first time in what felt like hours or days, I thought I might have escaped. I exhaled shakily and allowed myself a small, almost embarrassed laugh. I had been tense, terrified, overwhelmed by fog and distorted radios and the looping highway. Now, maybe I could just drive home. Maybe I could leave this nightmare behind. I glanced in the rearview mirror, expecting the empty, silent stretch of road behind me. That's when I saw it, or rather, what wasn't supposed to be there. The car behind me was my own reflection, but fractured. One of the headlights flickered unevenly. The hood had a dent I was certain hadn't been there before, and the passenger side mirror hung at an awkward angle. My stomach sank. I touched the dent, just to be sure I wasn't imagining it. Cold metal met my palm. The damage was real. My fingers lingered over the twisted steel, and I realized something horrifying. I hadn't hit anything. Not that I could remember. The fog had been thick. The road had been empty, or at least it seemed empty, but now my car bore the evidence of collisions I couldn't account for. I swallowed hard. My heartbeat thrummed in my ears, a frantic drum I couldn't silence. The thought that kept gnawing at me was simple and terrible. Something had been there, something I hadn't seen, something I couldn't explain, and now it had left its mark. I drove on, slower this time, cautious. I scanned in the empty road for anything that might have caused the damage. Branches? Guardrails? Debris? Nothing. The asphalt stretched out like a ribbon of black under the moonlight, glistening wet, empty. I passed mile markers I recognized from countless drives, familiar curves I could navigate in my sleep. Everything seemed normal, almost peaceful, too peaceful. And then I heard them. Sirens, faint at first, distant, almost imperceptible over the hum of the tires. My heart leapt into my throat. Emergency vehicles? Maybe the accidents from earlier? Maybe the reports on the radio had finally caught up to reality. I blinked, trying to pinpoint the sound. It was coming from behind me, the wail faint but growing steadily louder. I glanced in the rearview mirror. No lights, no flashing red or blue. Nothing but the dark, empty highway and my own trembling reflection. Yet the sirens grew closer, echoing in the night, bouncing off the fog-still remnants that clung to the trees along the roadside. They weren't real, at least not yet, but my mind treated them as if they were, and panic gripped me again like an icy hand around my chest. I tried to focus. Rational thought, logic. Perhaps I had drifted into a small valley, and the sound was carrying strangely, distorted by the terrain. Perhaps my mind was overreacting after hours of fear and fatigue. But rational thought was useless. The damage on my car, the endless fog, the impossible radio reports, they had broken something in me. I couldn't think clearly anymore. Only fear remained. The sirens pulsed, uneven, sometimes soft, sometimes deafening, and I realized they weren't coming closer. They weren't moving. They were following a rhythm, rising and falling, like breathing. My hands tightened on the wheel. I wanted to stop, to pull over, to see if the sound were real, to confront them, but my legs refused to obey. I was frozen in motion, trapped behind the wheel, a passenger in my own terror. I tried to remember the road behind me. The fog had cleared, yes, but I could still feel it lingering at the edges of perception, like a shadow brushing against my mind. Every twist, every turn, every dent in the car pressed itself into my memory. Something unseen had been here, something that had moved with the road, with the fog, with time itself. And now the sirens, distant and impossible, were part of it, part of the road's memory, echoing back at me, reminding me I wasn't safe. I slowed further, glancing over my shoulder repeatedly. My headlights reflected off wet asphalt, showing nothing but black, empty trees, the faint glimmer of road paint. Nothing moved. No other cars, no emergency vehicles, no people. Just me and the highway and the eerie silence that came between each wail of the sirens. I tried to call someone. My hand shook as I fumbled with the phone, only to find no signal. Nothing but dead space. The memory of the distorted 911 calls, the cries of the dead and the missing, all played back in my mind like a film I couldn't stop. And now the sirens. They were an accompaniment, a soundtrack to the endless dread that had wrapped itself around my consciousness. I tried to convince myself I was overreacting. Maybe the fog had made me hyper-aware. Maybe my imagination had filled the void with impossible sounds and memories. Maybe the damage on the car had been old, unnoticed until now. But deep down, I knew better. I could feel it, the pulse of the night, the subtle shifting of the world around me. Something unseen had been here. Something had left evidence. And that presence hadn't left with the fog. I drove on, slow, careful, trying to find the first sign of normalcy. A gas station, a street light, a familiar curve. But everything felt off. Every shadow seemed to move just at the edge of perception. Every tree seemed to lean closer, watching, waiting. The road was the same as it had always been, and yet not. It was a highway I knew, and yet it wasn't. The dents in the car were proof. The unseen collisions were proof. And the sirens, impossibly real and unreal at the same time, were proof that the night wasn't finished with me. I considered pulling over, leaving the car, walking until I found civilization. Some proof that reality still held meaning, but the tires hummed against the asphalt, and I couldn't bring myself to stop. Some part of me knew that stepping outside the vehicle would be worse than staying inside. Inside, I had some illusion of control. Outside, I had nothing. The night would claim me. The fog would return. The highway would loop again. The sirens would follow. And then I noticed something else. A small crack in the windshield, fine and spiderwebbed. I hadn't hit anything, hadn't even come close to debris. I pressed a hand to it, feeling the tiny vibrations under my fingertips. The crack seemed to pulse, alive, spreading slowly, impossibly, like the mark of the night itself. My breath caught in my throat. The car wasn't just damaged. It was a record, a diary, a proof that the world had been around me in ways I couldn't understand. The sirens continued, growing and fading, echoing through the night. I realized I couldn't hear them with my ears alone. I felt them in my chest and my stomach, in the skin of my hands gripping the wheel. They were not coming from behind or ahead or the sides. They were inside me, a resonance of everything the fog had touched, everything the road had warped, everything the night had claimed. I wanted to scream, to yell, to vent this terror, but my voice caught in my throat. I was alone, truly alone, and yet I wasn't. The dents, the crack, the sirens, the memories, they were all proof that the night, the fog, the road. They remembered me. They weren't finished. They were patient. They were eternal. And they were watching. I drove on, headlights cutting wet ribbons into the darkness, windshield spiderwebbed, tires humming. The fog was gone, yes, but it left a mark, and I knew I carried it with me. The world seemed calm, almost peaceful, almost normal, and yet I could feel it. The presence, the memory, the ghosts of collisions I couldn't see, the distorted cries, the sirens that weren't real but could never be ignored. I realized then that the highway wasn't just a road. It was a record, a witness, a trap, the dents in my car, the crack in the windshield, the distant sirens. They were its way of marking me, reminding me that I had been inside its memory, that I had been observed, measured, recorded, and no matter how far I drove, no matter how far I thought I had escaped, it would follow. Patient, silent, unrelenting. I drove on, alone on the highway, past curves and mile markers I knew, and yet didn't, past trees that seemed to lean and watch, past a quiet that was anything but quiet. And I understood, with a clarity that chilled me to the bone, that some nights aren't meant to be survived. They are only meant to be endured, witnessed, remembered, and somewhere in the distance, faint but certain, the sirens continued. I had been driving for hours, the hum of the tires on the asphalt and the occasional passing headlights the only company I had. Night had fallen long ago, and the highway stretched ahead like a black ribbon, empty and unbroken. The sky was a deep, cold black, with only a sliver of moonlight reflecting off the wet road from a recent rain. I was tired, my eyes heavy, but I couldn't stop yet. I had to reach the next exit, the next town, anywhere that felt normal. That's when I noticed it. The headlights behind me, bright, wide, and impossibly close. At first, I thought it was just another car, someone who had been driving faster than me. But as I shifted in my lane, it followed. I accelerated. It followed. A semi-truck, massive, black. The kind that makes your stomach twist when you think about what it could do to a small car. The lights were glaring in my rear-view mirror, harsh and unblinking. I tried not to panic. Maybe the driver didn't see me. Maybe they were just impatient. Maybe it was nothing. But something in the way those lights stayed locked onto me, unwavering, sent a shiver down my spine. I tapped the brakes lightly, letting the truck pass. Just a small gesture, a fraction of a second, and I'd be safe in another lane. But the truck didn't pass. It matched my speed perfectly, like it was aware of every inch I moved. I swerved slightly to the left, testing, and the truck mirrored me immediately. My pulse jumped. I tried to ignore it first, reasoning that maybe the highway was just narrow, that the truck couldn't pass easily. But the road had stretches, long stretches of straight, wide asphalt, plenty of room to overtake. I moved into the left lane, hoping to put distance between us. The truck shifted, stayed behind, engine growling low and steady, tires rolling with deliberate, crushing precision. It felt personal. I pressed down on the accelerator, heart hammering. The truck stayed glued to my rear-view mirror. I tried again, weaving slightly, then speeding up, hoping to lose it in a turn or a hill. But it followed. Every maneuver, every attempt to escape, met with the same relentless pursuit. My mind raced. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe the exhaustion was making me see patterns where there were none. But the size of the vehicle, the sheer presence, the unblinking lights, I couldn't unsee it. I could feel it pressing against me. Through the mirror, through the air, a weight I could almost touch. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, dark and wet, reflecting the truck's lights in the puddles and the asphalt. I tried to focus on breathing, trying to tell myself it was just a driver, just a truck, just a long night and a tired mind. But the sound of the engine behind me was different than any truck I had ever heard. Low, steady, mechanical, like it had a life of its own. Each rumble echoed in my chest, and the closer I felt it, the harder it pressed against my nerves. I glanced at my mirrors constantly. Every time I dared to look, the truck loomed there, impossibly close, occupying every angle I could see. I tried to imagine the driver, maybe tired, maybe drunk, maybe a professional unaware of how much they frightened me. But the feeling, deep and insistent, told me that it wasn't a driver I could reason with, not in the normal sense of things. The rain began again, light at first, then heavier, slicking the road. My wipers worked furiously, trying to clear the droplets, try to give me some visibility. But even with the road washed and shiny, the truck stayed. Tire tracks and wet asphalt reflected the headlights, showing its massive shape, always behind me, following, waiting. I considered taking the next exit, leaving the highway, trying to find a gas station, a rest stop, anywhere to let this nightmare end. But the exits approached and passed. one after the other. And each time I glanced in the rear view, the truck was still there. No hesitation, no slowing down, no diversion. Just constant, patient pursuit. My hand shook on the wheel. I could feel the tension in my shoulders, the rise and fall of my chest, the panic clawing at the edges of my mind. I tried to tell myself I could handle this. I had driven at night before. I had faced impatient drivers. But nothing in my experience could compare to this. This wasn't ordinary. It wasn't just a truck. It was the where. I thought about pulling off into the shoulder, hoping the truck would pass, hoping it would continue down the highway. But the shoulder was slick, narrow, dangerous, and the truck's headlights still burned in the rear view. I couldn't escape. I couldn't stop. I was trapped on this stretch of road with something that didn't belong, something that refused to let go. Every mile marker that passed felt like a countdown, each second stretching longer than it should. The engine behind me was steady, relentless, a reminder that the night wasn't mine to command. I tried to focus on the road, on the curves ahead, on keeping the tires on the painted lines. But the presence behind me pressed into my back, unrelenting, impossible to ignore. I forced myself to breathe, slow, measured breaths, grounding myself. Keep your eyes on the road. Keep your hands on the wheel. Keep going. But the longer I drove, the more I realized this wasn't about distance. It wasn't about exits or curves or towns. It was about time, about space, about the feeling of being hunted on an empty highway where the normal rules didn't apply. The fog that had been rolling in earlier started to return, creeping along the edges of the headlights, coiling around the truck. It gave the scene a dreamlike quality, like the world had been drained of context. The road stretched and twisted, and I began to lose a sense of how far I had driven or how long I had been on this section. The truck stayed behind me, persistent, mechanical, patient. I tried talking out loud, reasoning with the air, the night, the truck, anyone who might hear me. Just pass me, I whispered. Just go on, leave me alone. My voice sounded weak even to myself, swallowed by the sound of rain hitting the windshield, the tires on wet asphalt, and the growl of the truck behind. No response. None was expected. None came. The road curved slightly, then straightened. I pressed the accelerator, trying to put distance between us, to create some sense of control, some measure of hope. But the truck matched me perfectly, every inch, every foot, every mile. It was as if my movements were being mirrored, predicted, counted before they happened. Panic blossomed fully then, cold and deep, filling my chest with ice. I thought about my life, absurdly, in those moments. The little worries, the work, the errands, the dinners missed, the emails unsent. None of it mattered anymore. All that existed was me, this car, and the relentless, impossible truck following me through the night, through the rain, through the creeping darkness. Minutes blurred into each other, each turn and straightaway blending into one long, unending stretch of terror. I could feel exhaustion clawing at my eyelids, the muscles in my shoulders screaming. But stopping was an option. I couldn't bring myself to release the accelerator, couldn't bring myself to yield to the impossibility of what was happening. Then, just as suddenly as I had noticed it, the truck's headlights disappeared. My stomach lurched, a hollow panic replacing the tension. Had I passed it? Had I taken an exit? Had it left the highway? Or had it vanished in the way impossible things vanish in nightmares, leaving no trace but memory and the fear that follows you even into daylight? I slowed, cautiously, glancing in the rearview mirror. Empty, silent. The stretch of road behind me was just asphalt and fog, reflections of streetlights I hadn't noticed before, nothing else. My hands were trembling, my chest heaving, and I felt a dizzying, surreal mix of relief and suspicion. The truck was gone, and yet I knew it hadn't left. Not really. The night stretched ahead, the highway slick and dark, and I realized something I didn't want to admit. I would never feel safe on this road again. Every mile marker, every curve, every stretch of dark asphalt will remind me of the tailgater that had pursued me, impossible, relentless, aware. And no matter how far I drove, the memory would follow, echoing like the growl of an engine in the back of my skull, whispering that some nights, some stretches of highway, are never truly empty. I gripped the wheel, white-knuckled, and continued driving. eyes forward, heart racing, breath shallow. Every instinct told me to keep going, to reach the next town, the next light, the next sign of life. But deep down, I knew the truth. On this road at night, anything can follow you, and sometimes it doesn't need to show itself to be there. Finally saw the sign for the rest area, a faint rectangle illuminated by the glow of my headlights. Relief surged through me. I needed to stop. I needed to breathe. My hands were raw from gripping the wheel, knuckles white, arms tense from hours of anticipating that massive truck's every move. The fog had thinned slightly, but the memory of those relentless headlights pressed against the back of my mind, heavy and unyielding. I slowed, signaling, and pulled into parking lot. The wet asphalt shone under the dim lights, puddles reflecting the scattered illumination like fragments of shattered glass. I glanced in the rear-view mirror once, half expecting to see the truck creeping toward me through the foggy lot. But there was nothing. The highway behind me was empty. No growl, no glare, no monstrous headlights. Just silence. The kind of silence that feels too thick, too heavy, like the world is holding its breath. I exhaled shakily and turned off the engine. The air in the car smelled of damp asphalt and fear, a mix of adrenaline and exhaustion. I sank back into the seat, hands still gripping the wheel, trying to calm the tremors that ran through my body. For a moment, I thought maybe it was over. Maybe I had escaped. Then I noticed something strange. There were no tracks behind me, no tire marks, no evidence of a semi-truck ever being there. Nothing. It was as if the thing had never existed, as if my mind had conjured it entirely. My pulse quickened again. I knew what I had seen. I knew what I had felt. The dent in my car, the pressure in my chest, the unblinking presence in the mirror. It had been real. And yet now, gone. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I had imagined the truck, overworked, exhausted, too afraid to let my mind rest. But the memory of it, so vivid and precise, refused to let me convince myself. And then the fear crept back in slowly, subtly, in the corners of the rest area. The empty lot looked normal enough, but the silence carried weight. Every shadow seemed to twitch at the edges of vision. Every tree seemed to lean just slightly toward the lot, watching. I reached for my phone. My hands were still shaking, but I needed someone to know, someone to respond, someone to tell me I wasn't losing my mind. I dialed 911. Every second it took to connect felt like an eternity. The dial tone hummed, a cruel, unyielding prelude to what I knew I was about to face. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's voice was calm, professional, a stark contrast to the chaos in my chest. I think someone's following me, I said, voice trembling. A truck, a semi, it wouldn't leave me alone. I pulled off at the rest area, but my words caught in my throat. I glanced in the rear-view mirror again, just in case, but the lot was still empty. No headlights, no growl, nothing. The operator's voice remained steady. Sir, I need you to calm down and tell me exactly what happened. I tried to, recounting every detail. The lights, the movements, the way it matched every maneuver, the pressure in my chest, the fear that had built hour by hour. I spoke quickly, almost frantically, as if speed could anchor me to reality. But halfway through, I heard a whisper soft, so faint I almost thought it was my own imagination. My name. I froze, eyes darting around the empty rest area. My heart lurched into my throat. The whisper had come from somewhere that shouldn't have held sound. The operator didn't respond immediately either, and I realized I was hearing it through the phone. My own voice echoed back, or maybe it was something else, something imitating, something watching. Sir, the operator said, calm but cautious. Are you there? Yes, I stammered, swallowing hard. Yes, I'm here. I just heard someone say my name. My hand trembled on the phone, voice rising, almost frantic. I don't know who it is. I'm at the rest area off Highway 14, mile marker. I paused, swallowing hard. Even the mile marker seemed surreal now, like it didn't exist in the same world as the truck, as the fog, as the whisper. The operator didn't say anything immediately. Instead, the whisper came again. My name, closer this time, more deliberate, clearer. My skin prickled. I spun in the seat, trying to locate the source. But the lot remained empty, asphalt wet, dim light swaying faintly in the breeze, nothing else. I don't understand, I said, voice low and shaking. I'm alone here, but someone or something is saying my name. There was a pause on the line. Then, almost impossibly, I heard again, my name. This time, it overlapped my own voice on the call, distorted slightly, as if bending through space and time, warping into something that wasn't human. My stomach knotted. My pulse raced. I couldn't tell if it was behind me in the phone or inside my head. Sir, the operator said carefully, voice steady but laser concerned. Can you check around you? Is anyone there? I swallowed, trembling. I don't see anyone, I said, eyes scanning the lot again. Empty. My reflection in the windshield, pale and wide-eyed, stared back at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was just outside my vision, just beyond the reach of the light, observing, patient. My name, the whisper repeated, almost teasing this time, slow, deliberate, curling into my chest like smoke. I couldn't breathe properly. My hands gripped the phone and the steering wheel, trying to ground myself. It wasn't wind. It wasn't the trees. It wasn't the operator. It was something else. Sir, the operator repeated, voice careful. I need you to stay on the line with me. Help is on the way. Can you stay inside your vehicle? I nodded, though I knew they couldn't see me. I'm inside the car. I won't get out. My voice shook. The whisper came again, impossibly close now, soft and insistent. My name, I could feel it vibrating through the air, through the glass, through my chest. I tried to keep talking to the operator, giving details, trying to anchor myself in reality. Every sentence felt like a lifeline, a thread keeping me tethered. I saw it, the truck, it followed me, and now it's gone, but something's still here, saying my name. The operator was silent for a long moment. Then, cautiously, stay calm, sir. Help is on the way. Can you lock your doors? Yes. I pressed the locks, fingers trembling. The whisper came one more time, faint, almost playful. My name, then nothing, just static on the line for a moment. And then the operator's calm voice returned. Sir, can you describe anything else? Any shapes? Any movement? I shook my head, though it didn't matter. They couldn't see me. The lot was empty. Everything was normal. Too normal. But I could feel the presence, just beyond perception, just out of sight, patient, waiting, feeding on my fear. The reality outside the car was silent, ordinary, but the world inside the vehicle, inside the call, inside my mind was anything but. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. I couldn't tell. Time had fractured into a series of pulses. Each breath, each heartbeat, each whisper stretching into eternity. I kept talking to the operator, answering questions, giving locations, repeating the details of the truck, of the fog, of the whispered name. All the while, I felt that presence lingering just beyond the edge of visibility. Patient, knowing, waiting for me to make a mistake. Finally, distant lights approached, flashing faintly in the rearview mirror. The sound of sirens grew, real this time, urgent, breaking through the tension that coiled in my chest. Relief surged, but it was tempered with suspicion. I glanced around, heart still hammering. The lot remained empty. The truck was gone, but the whisper had left a mark, a residue, like smoke in the corners of my mind, reminding me that whatever I had experienced wasn't gone. I felt the operator's voice, calm and professional, guiding me through safety procedures, asking questions I answered mechanically, heart still racing, hands still trembling. The patrol car pulled into the lot, headlights bright, engine humming steadily. I exhaled shakily, grateful and terrified all at once. Help had arrived, but I knew, deep down, that the night wasn't finished with me. Not yet. Even as I rolled down the window to speak to the officer, I could still feel it, lurking just beyond the edge of perception, patient and silent. The truck, the whisper, the fog, the relentless pursuit, they weren't gone. Only waiting for the next time I thought I was safe. I finally reached my driveway with hands still trembling, knuckles white from gripping the wheel. The streetlights of my neighborhood glimmered dimly, familiar and comforting in a way only home can be after hours of uncertainty and fear. I had made it. The highway, the truck, the fog, all of it seemed to recede behind me. Relief washed over me, fragile and trembling, but was there, tangible enough that I dared to believe I had escaped. I slowed my car, taking in the familiar shapes of my home. The mailbox, the old oak tree, the small flower bed I had barely tended last spring. Everything looked normal, safe, the way it should. I exhaled a long, shaky breath and unbuckled my seatbelt. I told myself I would go inside, lock the doors, and never think about this night again. Then the sound came, a sudden, sharp crash outside, like metal striking metal, or a heavy object dropped with force I couldn't imagine. My heart leapt into my throat. I froze, every instinct screaming at me to look, to move, to run. But I was already at the edge of the driveway, car idling, engine growling softly in the otherwise still night. I dared to glance to the side. The semi-truck, parked silently in the driveway. Its lights were off. The engine was cold, or at least it seemed so. But there it was, immense, black, impossible, just like before. But now it wasn't following me. It was waiting, watching, patient. I blinked, certain that exhaustion or fear was warping my perception. My eyes traced the contours of the truck. The dents I remembered from earlier, the black gleam of wet metal reflecting the faint streetlights. Nothing made sense. I had driven all the way home, miles from the highway. The truck should have been hundreds of miles behind, if it existed at all. And yet there it was, massive and silent, occupying the space of my driveway as if it belonged there. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, gripping it as if the plastic could shield me from whatever had followed me home. I wanted to lock the doors and call the police, but something about the vehicle, the way it rested there, made my movement sluggish. A weight pressed on my chest, a cold hand of dread that rooted me to the seat. I thought back to the rest area, to the whisper over the 911 call. My name, someone or something knew me, had followed me, and now here at home it had manifested. My rational mind tried to argue, tried to insist that there was some explanation, some mistake, some illusion. But the growl of memory, the texture of fear, the shape of the truck in my driveway told me otherwise. I reached for my phone, hands shaking violently. I dialed 911, trying to keep my voice steady as I explained my address, my situation, the impossible circumstances. The operator's voice was calm, familiar, grounding. Help is on the way, they said, but I barely heard them. My gaze was locked on the truck, trying to predict what it might do, expecting movement that didn't come. And then I noticed the details I had missed at first glance. The tires, perfectly aligned, went from nowhere. The doors, closed but not locked. The trailer, looming in the shadows, reflecting no light, but absorbing it instead, like black water. It was impossible unnatural. The more I looked, the more my stomach knotted, the more the hair on the back of my neck rose. I wanted to scream, to wake the neighbors, to do anything to disrupt this impossible presence. But my voice failed me. Words caught in my throat. Every instinct told me to flee, but my feet wouldn't move. I was trapped by my own terror, anchored to the car seat, eyes wide and unblinking, staring at the silent sentinel in my driveway. Time stretched, slow and thick. I felt like I had been there for hours, though it had been minutes. My mind raced, cataloging every possible way to escape, every route the truck might take, every place I could hide. But every option dissolved under the weight of impossibility. The truck didn't move. It didn't breathe. It simply existed, patient and deliberate, waiting for me to make a mistake. I tried to reason with myself. It had to be someone playing a prank, some neighbor with a dark sense of humor. But the size, the silence, the way it had followed me from the highway. Pranks didn't follow you home for miles, didn't whisper your name over a 911 call, didn't leave dents and scratches that weren't there before. This was beyond comprehension, beyond explanation. I considered getting out of the car, confronting the impossible, hoping movement or confrontation would make sense of the chaos. but even imagining it filled me with nausea and fear. The truck was too large, too silent, too deliberate. Its presence alone was an assertion, a warning. I stayed where I was, car locked, engine running, phone clutched like a lifeline. Minutes passed again, or was it hours? The night remained still, quiet, almost expectant. I could feel the heat of my own fear radiating, mixing with the damp air of the driveway, making it hard to breathe. I thought about the hours on the highway, the relentless chase, the whispering, the feeling that something impossible was always just behind me. And now I realized the chase hadn't ended. Not in the sense I had hoped. It had followed me here, to my home, to the place I had always thought was safe. I thought about calling someone else, a friend, a family member. Maybe they could see it, confirm it, understand it. But then I realized something that chilled me to the bone. They wouldn't see it. They wouldn't see anything. They would see an empty driveway, a quiet night, and a trembling, paranoid version of me. The impossibility of it existed only for me, only in my perception, only in my terror. The whisper returned, faint at first, curling along the edges of my consciousness. Not through the phone this time, not through any medium I could comprehend. It was inside my head, delicate, teasing, deliberate. My name, it didn't demand attention. It insinuated itself into my thoughts, embedding like a shadow under my skin. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, trying to keep my mind anchored. The whisper repeated, a mantra now, slow and steady. My name, and with it, the shape of the truck became more real, more solid in my mind. I could feel the weight of it pressing through the metal and paint, pressing into the night, pressing into me. I tried to blink it away, to close my eyes, to pretend that the world outside the windshield didn't exist. But when I opened them, it was still there, silent, immense, waiting. My driveway, my home, the world I thought I could control, it had been invaded, corrupted by this impossible presence. I felt like I was unraveling, slowly, thread by thread. Hours of terror, the relentless chase, the whispers, the fog, the impossible tracking. It all coalesced here, now at home. And yet, the truck didn't move. It didn't signal its intentions. It simply existed, and that was enough. Enough to hold me captive in my own driveway, trapped by fear I couldn't rationalize, by impossibility I couldn't escape. I considered leaving, driving off into the night, fleeing again, trying to put distance between me and this impossible thing. But even as I started the engine, the weight of dread pressed down, making it hard to move. The driveway stretched behind me, empty yet charged with expectation. The night seemed alive, attuned to me, attentive, patient. I realized then, with a clarity that made my stomach churn, that this wasn't about distance or speed or control. This was about inevitability. Whatever had followed me, haunted me, whispered my name, existed outside normal rules. It had chosen me. And now, in my driveway, in my home, it had made itself known. The police would arrive soon, or so I hoped. But I knew, deep down, that no patrol car, no explanation, no human intervention could undo the presence in my driveway. It wasn't a thing to be caught, restrained, or understood. It was patient. It was deliberate. It was inevitable. And it was mine to endure. I sat in the car, locked doors, hands white on the wheel, breath shallow, waiting for help, waiting for morning, waiting for something that might never come. The night was alive with the hum of impossibility. The truck remained, lights off, silent, patient. A reminder that some terrors do not chase. Some simply wait. And for the first time, I understood the depth of that waiting, the slow burn of dread that would haunt every mile, every driveway, every night, until I could no longer remember what safety even felt like. The road stretched out ahead like a ribbon of black silk, thin and uneven under the faint glow of my headlights. I had taken this rural stretch countless times, but tonight it felt different. Quieter, heavier, as if the world had been stripped down to nothing but asphalt and trees. My phone, resting on the passenger seat, buzzed faintly, a signal bar blinking at me like a warning I couldn't quite understand. I glanced down. 1 bar, then nothing. Gone. The little icon at the top of the screen mocked me. No service. I pressed the buttons, flipped the settings, restarted the phone. Anything. but it was dead. Just me, the car, and the dark ribbon of road ahead. I exhaled slowly, trying to ignore the creeping unease. No service wasn't uncommon out here. The cell towers were sparse, and the terrain swallowed signals like they were never there. Still, it was unsettling, this complete absence of connection. There's a comfort in knowing that even if something goes wrong, someone can reach you, can pull you back into the world of rules and normalcy. Without it, I felt exposed, small, like I was crawling along the edge of the world with no safety net. Then I saw it, a flash of motion, sudden and bright. Another car, silver, too fast for the winding curves, fishtailing slightly as it moved. And then the crash, metal bent and twisted in an instant, headlights spinning in arcs of broken glass and flame. My stomach lurched. I slammed on the brakes, tires screeching faintly against the asphalt, and my hands trembled as I tried to focus. I wanted to call for help immediately. I reached for the phone, almost instinctively. No service. Nothing. My chest tightened, a weight pressing down, making it hard to breathe. The crash seemed impossibly close and impossibly far at the same time. The smell of burning rubber and gasoline filled my senses. But I knew it wasn't real yet. Not for me. I was still behind the wheel, still in control, but everything else had shifted. The normal rules had been suspended. I pulled over to the shoulder, car sliding slightly on gravel. My pulse raced, my knuckles white on the wheel. Part of me wanted to rush to the wreck, to help, to do something, but the other part, the primal, screaming part, urged me to stay in the car, to protect myself from whatever this night was shaping into. The silver car sat in the ditch now, crumpled, smoke rising from a hood. I couldn't see anyone moving. Couldn't hear a sound over the pounding of my own heart. My breath came in short, uneven gasps as I considered my options. No phone, no self-service, no one around. The road behind and ahead stretched into the darkness, empty, infinite. I grabbed the door handle, fingers shaking, and stepped out. The air was cool, damp, smelling faintly of rain and burnt rubber. The ground was uneven, gravel pressing into my shoes, and every step felt exaggerated, heavy. I approached the car slowly, trying to see if anyone needed help, if I could offer it before the world pulled me back into silence. And that's when I realized something that made my stomach twist. No one was inside, not a single occupant. The driver's seat was empty. The passenger seat, the back, empty. The airbags had deployed. Smoke hung in the air, and the car was obviously wrecked. Yet no person had emerged, no cries for help, nothing. Just a silent metal shell of a car that had moments ago been violently transformed. I spun around, heart hammering. The road was empty. Trees leaned overhead like silent sentinels, shadows pooling at the edges of my vision. No headlights, no other cars, nothing. And then I heard the faintest sound, barely perceptible over the roar of my own heartbeat, a whispering wind through the trees. But it wasn't wind. It was deliberate, rhythmic, almost like a warning, almost like a voice shaped in the rustling of leaves. I wanted to turn back, to flee to the nearest town, to anywhere that had service, light life. But as I moved toward my car, my phone buzzed faintly, just enough to make me jump. One bar, then gone. My fingers pressed against it, desperate, but it was dead again. I was trapped in this stretch of road with no connection to the world I relied on. Every instinct screamed at me. Get back in the car. Drive. Don't look. Don't think. But my curiosity, my compulsion to understand, drew me closer to the silver car. Smoke spiraled in the still night air, curling like ghostly fingers, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Not by a person, but by something patient, deliberate, aware. I reached the driver's side. The door was crumpled slightly, still warm under my hand. The smell of burning plastic clung to it, sharp and biting. I looked inside again. Empty, no sign of a struggle, no sign of life, just a wreck. And yet everything felt wrong, like time had been here, like the crash existed outside reality. A snapshot of violence frozen in a place where nothing else could intrude. I stepped back, glancing down the road, searching for lights, searching for any sign of human life. Nothing. The night swallowed everything. The stars were dim, clouds rolling in, and a sense of isolation pressed down like a physical weight. I realized with a sinking certainty that I wasn't just alone. I was cut off entirely, utterly alone in a dead zone where the rules of the world didn't apply. I took a shaky breath and stepped back toward my car. Every step was heavy, deliberate, as if the ground itself was resisting me. I had to get off this road, had to find service, had to escape the stillness that felt alive, aware. I unlocked the door, slid inside, and started the engine. The roar of the tires on asphalt was comforting for a fraction of a second, but then I noticed it. The subtle shimmer in the distance, faint, like headlights reflecting off wet metal. I squinted. Nothing, just my imagination. I forced myself to focus on driving. The car moving cautiously down the dark road. Each mile stretched longer than it should. The crash, the empty car, the impossible silence. It all haunted me with every turn of the wheel. I told myself I was rational. I had seen wrecks before. I had seen stranded drivers. But this was different. This wasn't just a car accident. It was something that refused to be contained within logic. Hours or minutes later, I glanced at my phone. No service. Still, panic rose like bile in my throat. The highway seemed endless, looping in shadows. Every tree and curve familiar yet alien. My eyes darted to every reflective surface, every mirror, every wet patch of road that might hide something impossible. I felt like I was being drawn into the night, absorbed into the stretch of road that had suddenly become more than asphalt and trees. It was alive, aware, patient. A flash of movement on the side of the road made me swerve slightly hard in my throat. Nothing, just shadows, trees, the whisper of wind. Or was it something else? I forced my eyes back on the road. I couldn't stop, couldn't slow. The dead zone had swallowed everything but me, and I realized with dread that tightened my chest that I might not leave it unchanged. The car hummed beneath me, tires rolling over asphalt that seemed to stretch infinitely. I gripped the wheel, white-knuckled, and tried to tell myself that help was ahead, that the next town would bring service, light, normalcy. But the dead zone pressed against me, a tangible weight of isolation and fear, reminding me that some stretches of road are empty not because they're forgotten, but because something waits there, silent, patient, observing, unbound by rules or reason. I kept driving, heart pounding, eyes straining for any sign of life, any confirmation that the world beyond the stretch still existed. The silver car, mangled and empty, haunted every thought. I couldn't explain it, couldn't rationalize it, and as the minutes stretched, I understood that the dead zone wasn't just a place. It was a state of being, a suspension of certainty, a space where time and reality bent, leaving you exposed, alone, and waiting. And I was waiting, too. Waiting to reach a place that might not exist, a signal that might never return, a world where the rules still mattered. I had been driving for what felt like hours, though the dead zone made it impossible to tell. The radio was dead. The phone had no bars, and every curve of the road seemed to stretch longer than the last. The silence pressed on me like a weight, thick and heavy, a living thing that made every heartbeat sound deafening. My hands were white-knuckled on the wheel, my eyes scanning the shadows that clung to the edges of the trees. That's when I saw the lights. A single pair of headlights bobbed ahead, moving slowly, almost deliberately. At first, I thought it was another stranded driver, someone unlucky enough to be caught in the same stretch of road. Relief washed through me, fleeting but sharp. Maybe someone could help. Maybe I wasn't entirely alone. I slowed, signaling with a trembling hand. The vehicle drew closer, a faded black SUV, its shape just barely visible through the gloom. The engine hummed quietly, and then the vehicle stopped in the middle of the lane, blocking my path. I gripped the wheel tighter, heart hammering. A figure stepped out. I couldn't see a face, only shadows, a silhouette obscured beneath the brim of a hat or the hood of a coat. The figure waved, slow, deliberate, almost casual, like they had been waiting for me to arrive. I rolled down the window cautiously. "Are you okay?" I asked, voice tight. "Do you need help?" The stranger didn't answer immediately. Instead, they tilted their heads slightly, and I felt that they were looking right through me, not at me, as if they could see every thought, every memory, every fear. When they finally spoke, the voice was low, calm and strange. "You're not meant to go back," they said. I frowned, confusion flickering across my face. "What do you mean?" "I just want to find the highway. I need service. I need to." "You need to follow me," they interrupted, stepping closer. "The way you came, it isn't safe anymore. The road isn't what you think. I can guide you." Something in the tone sent a shiver down my spine. Calm, certain, unquestionable. I opened my mouth to argue, to insist I could find my own way, but no words came. My throat felt tight, my voice trapped. A part of me wanted to run back to the car, lock the doors, and drive into the dark until the dead zone ended. But another, darker part, the part that had been haunted by the crash, the fog, the silence, knew that arguing would be pointless. This figure wasn't just a person. They were something else, something deliberate, something that belonged here. I nodded slowly, more out of instinct than agreement. "Okay," I said, voice barely above a whisper. "I'll follow." The stranger gestured toward a narrow dirt path that branched off from the main road, swallowed immediately by shadows and trees. The air there smelled different, damp, earthy, almost metallic, like the smell of something buried long ago. I hesitated at the edge of the path. My rational mind screamed at me to turn back, to abandon the stranger and get as far from this dead zone as possible. But curiosity, exhaustion, and a nameless compulsion drove me forward. We moved slowly, the stranger leading the way, every step measured, silent on the soft dirt. I tried to look at their face, to catch any hint of human features, but the shadows clung to them as if they had been crafted to obscure identity. Even the dim light of my car's headlights didn't penetrate the darkness around their head. It was like looking at a living silhouette, alive yet empty, real yet impossible. "Why are you helping me?" I asked, voice trembling. "Who are you?" They paused, turning slightly, so I could see the outline of a hand, long fingers brushing against the trunk of a tree. "I'm not helping," they said softly. "I'm guiding. There's a difference." I swallowed hard, trying to make sense of it. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs felt leaden. My hand shook slightly, gripping the steering wheel I hadn't thought to leave behind. Guiding where? The stranger didn't answer immediately. Instead, they pointed deeper into the woods, where the darkness seemed almost solid, thickening with every step. "The road ahead doesn't exist the way you remember. There are other paths now. You must come this way." I wanted to argue, wanted to refuse, but the shadows of the trees seemed to stretch, almost closing around the road behind me. The dead zone felt alive, aware, and I realized, with a creeping certainty, that it had marked me. The path behind was no longer safe. The path ahead was my only choice. We moved further into the forest, the light from my headlights struggling to pierce the darkness. Every sound was amplified. The crunch of leaves underfoot, the whisper of wind to the branches, the faint rustling of something unseen in the shadows. My chest tightened. I felt the weight of isolation pressing in from all sides, the dead zone closing its grip. "Are there others here?" I asked, voice low, trembling. "Others who watch?" The stranger silhouette paused again, head tilting slightly. "There are always watchers," they said, "but they wait. They do not follow." I shivered. The words didn't comfort me. They didn't explain. They only deepened the sense that I had crossed into a space where ordinary rules did not apply, where the laws of time, space, and reason had no authority. We walked in silence for a while, each step deliberate. I tried to keep track of where we were, trying to find something familiar, some anchor to reality. But the forest twisted in ways that didn't make sense. Trees seemed to shift slightly when I wasn't looking. Paths curved impossibly. Shadows pooled where they shouldn't. My rational mind fought against it, insisting that exhaustion was playing tricks, that the dead zone was bending perception. But my gut told me otherwise. Something was here, patient, aware, waiting, and I was not meant to escape without following the stranger. After what felt like an eternity, I noticed the first signs of movement ahead. A faint glow, like fireflies or distant lanterns, flickered between the trees. I squinted, trying to understand. The stranger paused, glancing back at me, head still shadowed, unreadable. "Do not speak," they said quietly. "Do not look too closely." Just follow. Keep your eyes forward. I nodded, swallowing hard. The forest around me seemed to lean in, closing the distance between the path and the trees. Every step I took felt like sinking deeper into some unseen current, the path behind disappearing into impossibility. The dead zone was no longer a road, no longer a stretch of highway. It was alive, and I was inside it. I asked one more question, even as dread wrapped around my chest like iron chains. What happens if I don't follow? The stranger did not answer immediately. Then finally they said softly, almost like a warning, "You do not have that choice." The words froze me in place. My throat tightened, every muscle coiling with tension. My rational mind screamed at me to turn, to flee, to reject the impossible. But the forest had shifted. The path behind me was gone, replaced by shadow, trees, and the oppressive weight of the dead zone. The stranger stood patiently, an anchor and a guide to some place I could not yet comprehend, yet could not ignore. I took a deep, shivering breath. Step by step, I followed. Each footfall pressed into the soft earth with a muffled echo, swallowed immediately by darkness. Every instinct screamed at me to stop, to flee, to abandon reason and logic. But the dead zone had marked me. The forest waited, and the stranger, impossible and unreadable, led the way deeper into the unknown. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled my blood, that the world I had left behind, the highway, the car crash, even the simple rules of reality, had ceased to exist. Only this path, this darkness, and the shadowed figure guiding me remained. I barely noticed the mile markers slipping by as I drove, my hands tight on the wheel, knuckles white. The dead zone stretched on, dark and quiet, the trees pressing in from either side, making the road feel narrower than it should. I kept glancing at my phone, almost hoping, almost praying that the signal would return, that I could call someone, anyone, to tell them what was happening, to make sense of it. But the screen remained dark, lifeless. No service. The details. Every detail matched exactly what I had just seen a few miles back. The silver car, the skid marks, the crunch of metal, even the way the headlights spun in arcs as it rolled. I froze, gripping the wheel with both hands, staring at the phone like it had suddenly become alive. The recording continued, and my stomach sank deeper with each word. The operator described the injuries, the positions of the cars, the faint smell of smoke and burning rubber. It was impossible. These weren't old recordings. This had just happened, and yet the phone insisted that it was some archive clip time-stamped months ago. I tried to tell myself it was a coincidence, some glitch, some anomaly in the phone's memory. But my gut, that instinct buried deep and raw, screamed otherwise. This wasn't random. This was deliberate. Every sound, every detail, every crackling whisper matched the reality around me. I could hear the distant echo of tires on asphalt, and it synchronized perfectly with the audio. I slowed the car to a crawl, eyes darting to the sides of the road, searching for something, anything, that could explain this impossible phenomenon. The trees seemed to lean closer, shadows pooling unnaturally in the corners of my vision. The wind whispered through the branches, carrying faint echoes of voices, distant and distorted, almost like the phone's audio had bled into the night itself. I pressed the phone closer to my ear. Another report, another crash. This one described a black pickup truck colliding with a guardrail, occupants flailing, glass shattering. I remembered the brief glimpse of a truck further down the road, swerving just enough to unsettle me. Every detail, every small motion described by the recording matched what I had just witnessed or imagined moments ago. I slammed the brakes, heart pounding, the tires skidding slightly against the gravel shoulder. My mind raced, trying to rationalize what I was hearing. Phones don't do this. Recordings don't preempt reality. Time doesn't bend in such a precise, cruel way. And yet, here it was, proof pressed into my hands and ears. The world was fractured, slipping, echoing itself in impossible ways. I tried to scroll through the phone, to stop the audio, to throw it from the car, anything to regain control. But it wouldn't let me. Every swipe, every tap brought up another recording, another accident, another set of details that mirrored events I had not yet witnessed but seemed inevitable. My fingers trembled, phone slippery from sweat, and I could feel my mind unraveling thread by thread. The next clip was longer, a slow build of tension. A caller screamed, panicked, describing a van losing control on a curve. The operator's voice remained calm, professional, even as the caller's voice rose in terror. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I knew that curve, the one just ahead, and I knew that I was approaching it. My stomach lurched, and my pulse spiked. This wasn't just coincidence. The phone wasn't just replaying events. It was predicting them, narrating them in real time before they occurred. I slowed even more, heart hammering, scanning the road for signs. The curve came into view, perfectly matching the audio description. My breath caught. The asphalt was slick from the mist, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. I followed the curve cautiously, every nerve taut, every instinct screaming that I was walking, driving, into some carefully orchestrated trap. The 9/11 recording continued, now describing something I hadn't yet seen, something that hadn't happened but felt imminent. A shadow moving alongside the road, fleeting, barely perceptible, but there. My chest tightened. I knew, without thinking, that it was a stranger, or something like them, that I had glimpsed the previous night. The audio described movement that mirrored my own paranoia, echoing the patterns of fear etched into my mind. I realized then, with a slow, sinking horror, that the dead zone wasn't just a place of isolation. It was a place where time, reality, and perception bled together, where echoes of past and future collided in a way that left you suspended, helpless, and utterly exposed. The phone, the recordings, the voices, they were all part of it, part of the zone, part of the trap. I pulled over the side of the road, heart hammering, and tried to calm my racing thoughts. But every time I exhaled, every time I thought I might regain control, another recording started, another crash, another scream, another set of details that mirror reality perfectly. I tried to cover my ears, tried to ignore it, but the sound seeped through, insidious, relentless. And then I noticed something even worse. The calls weren't just from accidents. There were voices, familiar voices, mine, or something like mine. My name whispered through the static, almost imperceptible, but there, and the more I listened, the more the recording seemed to anticipate my reactions, narrating my fear as it unfolded. Every heartbeat, every shallow breath, every glance to the shadows along the road was described in the audio before I even acted. I swallowed hard, hands gripping the wheel, eyes wide. The road stretched ahead, empty yet charged with anticipation. I knew I had to move, to keep driving, or the dead zone would consume me completely. But each time I touched the accelerator, the phone crackled louder, each report syncing perfectly with my movements, each echo matching my terror in a way that made rational thought impossible. I realized then, with a dread that tightened my chest and made my stomach churn, that I wasn't just hearing recordings. I was inside them. The dead zone wasn't just a location. It was a narrative, and I was both audience and participant, trapped in a story that had already been written, yet was being written at the same time. The mist thickened, curling around the trees and road like living smoke. The echoes of 911 calls overlapped, layered, until the night was filled with overlapping voices, crashes, screams, and frantic dispatchers. I couldn't tell where the past ended and the present began. Every detail pressing on me, suffocating, impossible to ignore. I pressed the phone to my chest, clutching it as if it were a lifeline. But it wasn't. It was a tether, anchoring me to the dead zone, reminding me that I was completely alone, completely exposed, and completely trapped. My own voice joined the chorus in my mind, described and anticipated before I even spoke. I swallowed hard, tried to make sense, trying to reclaim rationality. But the road ahead twisted in impossible ways, trees leaning, shadows deepening, and the phone continued, narrating every second of the night with chilling precision. I realized with a cold, sinking certainty that the dead zone wasn't just outside me. It was inside me, shaping my perception, my fear, and perhaps even my fate. Every mile I drove, every turn I took, every reaction I made was mirrored perfectly in the echoes. The recordings were no longer audio. They were a map, a script, a warning, and a trap all at once. I couldn't escape it. I couldn't fight it. The dead zone had claimed me, and the echoes of past and future screamed my submission back to me with every distorted voice, every crashing metal sound, every scream that wasn't mine but somehow was. And as I drove deeper into the night, the forest pressing around me, the echoes continued, relentless, merciless, whispering, narrating, and anticipating every choice I made until I understood the absolute truth. In the dead zone, there is no escape. There are only echoes. I woke to the sound of rain tapping against the windshield, soft and constant, like the world was exhaling over me. I blinked against the dim light of morning and tried to make sense of where I was. The road stretched ahead, quiet, empty, the mist curling in the distance. My hands instinctively reached for the wheel. It was cold beneath my fingers. Too cold. Then I noticed something. The car was different. Or maybe I was. The doors were unlocked, though I was certain I'd locked them. The keys were still in the ignition, but my seatbelt hung slack, as if I had never buckled it. The radio, which I remembered turning off hours ago, hummed faintly, a static that seemed alive, vibrating in my chest. I tried to remember the night before, the dead zone, the stranger, the echoes of 911 calls that had predicted every accident, every movement, every heartbeat. I could remember the fear, the way the forest had pressed in around me, the shadows bending in impossible ways. But then I realized I couldn't remember actually leaving the car. I couldn't remember stepping out, getting back on the road. A chill ran through me. I reached for my phone. One bar. Just one. I tapped it, desperate, as if the signal alone could anchor me back to reality. And then the call connected. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's voice was calm, professional, but beneath it was a strange undertone, a tension that made my stomach knot. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words caught in my throat. Then I heard it, screaming. It wasn't coming from the car. It wasn't coming from me. It came through the speaker, faint at first, like it was miles away, but then it grew louder, closer, more insistent. The operator gasped, and a voice I couldn't identify shouted over the static. Highway 17 car, help. I pressed the phone closer, heart hammering, and tried to respond. But before I could speak, the operator's voice returned, calm and deliberate. Sir, we're picking up screams on the highway, exactly where you are reporting from. There's no other traffic, no cars, no signs of accident, just screaming. I couldn't breathe. My hand shook on the wheel, and the world outside the windshield seemed to darken, even though it was morning. Trees leaned closer, shadows pooling unnaturally. Every instinct screamed at me to drive, to flee, to escape. But the road stretched ahead endlessly, twisting subtly, unnaturally, like it had been reshaped while I slept. The screaming continued, fragmented, echoing over the radio and in my mind simultaneously. It wasn't constant. It rose and fell like a tide of terror. And with each wave, I felt a pull, a gravitational force I couldn't resist, dragging me deeper into the dead zone. The operator's voice cut through again, fragmented by static. Sir, the screams, they're repeating. We can't reach you. Stay in the car. I gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles white. Every fiber of my being screamed to escape. But my vision was narrowing, focusing solely on the road ahead. The mist curling at the edges like fingers reaching for me. I could feel the air thickening, almost solid, pressing in from every side, pulling me towards something unseen, unknown. I tried to remember how I had gotten here. Last night had been a blur of shadows, echoes, and the stranger guided me into the forest. I had followed without thinking, each step dictated by fear and some strange compulsion. But now, awake in a car that felt familiar and alien at the same time, I realized I had no memory of leaving the trees, of leaving the stranger, of anything beyond the road itself. The screaming grew louder, punctuated by words I couldn't decipher. My pulse raced, and I felt the sick, vertigo-inducing sensation of being watched. Not by one entity, but many. Shadows seemed to twist at the edges of the windshield, pulling in shapes that hinted at movement, consciousness, awareness. The dead zone had eyes, and they were on me. I tried to start the car, but the engine sputtered, coughing weakly, then died. Panic gripped me. I was trapped, not just in the car, but in the stretch of highway itself. My phone's one bar blinked faintly, then disappeared. Total isolation, total exposure, total helplessness. I tried to call out, my voice raw and hoarse. Hello? Anyone? Please. My words echoed faintly off the mist and trees, but no answer came. Only the screams, only the radio, only the oppressive weight of being utterly alone, yet observed. Minutes or hours passed. I couldn't tell. Time had become fluid here, warped, a slippery thing that bent around the edges of my perception. The screams over the radio continued, punctuated by static, fragmented sentences, distorted cries. And then I realized something worse. The voices weren't just over the radio. They were inside my head, whispering my own name, echoing my own thoughts, anticipating my reactions before I could even form them. I pressed my hands to my ears, try and block it, but it didn't help. The dead zone had no regard for barriers. The screaming, the whispers, the radio, they were one, inseparable, an organism of fear that had swallowed reason whole. I was the audience, the subject, and the prey all at once. I tried to reason, tried to find logic. Maybe it was a hallucination, maybe sleep deprivation, stress, the lingering fear from the stranger and the forest. But the details were too precise, too cruelly accurate. The radio reported a car skidding into a ditch just a mile ahead. I felt my hands tighten on the wheel as the stretch of road curved exactly as described. My stomach lurched. The next mile was narrated in real time by the voices. Every curve, every shadow, every wet patch on the asphalt was accounted for. I realized then that I was trapped not just by the highway, not just by the car, but by the dead zone itself. Every attempt to escape was anticipated, narrated, mirrored. I was inside a story that had already been written, yet was being written simultaneously, and every choice I made was recorded, echoed, and amplified. The radio crackled again, and I recognized one detail that made my blood run cold. The operator reported a car abandoned on the side of the highway. The description matched mine perfectly. My car, empty, keys in the ignition. No one inside. And yet I was here. I was inside it, alive, terrified, and already being documented. As if the dead zone refused to let me exist outside the narrative it had claimed. I couldn't turn back. I couldn't stop. Even if I wanted to, the road twisted subtly, impossibly, ensuring that I remained in its grip. Shadows leaned closer, the mist curling like living smoke, and the radio screamed, whispered, narrated. My fear was no longer private. It had been recorded, broadcast, amplified. I could not escape my own terror, because the dead zone had already consumed it, turning it into something larger, something patient, something aware. Hours or minutes passed in silence, broken only by the static-filled screams. My body was tense, every muscle coiled, ready to flee. But flee where? The dead zone had erased exits, erased logic, erased escape. The road behind me was gone, replaced by mist, shadows, and a silence that was deafening. Ahead, the forest leaned, the trees bending subtly, as if acknowledging my presence, corralling me deeper into the impossible geometry of this cursed stretch. I realized then that the dead zone didn't just trap bodies. It trapped perception, memory, time, and it fed on fear. Every sound, every echo, every scream was proof that I was both hunted and observed, yet powerless to intervene. Even the 911 operator's voice was not real. Or perhaps it was. Perhaps it was as trapped as I was, speaking into a void that bent reality around it, weaving us both into the same impossible narrative. I gripped the wheel, breath ragged, and forced myself to keep moving. Even though every mile felt like an eternity, the road stretched ahead, curving impossibly, the mist thickening, shadows deepening, and the radio continued, unrelenting, echoing every heartbeat, every step, every shallow breath. The dead zone had me, had my car, had my senses, and it would not let go. And I understood the absolute, gut-twisting truth. In the dead zone, even survival is a story that has already been written. Even fleeing is anticipated. Even screaming is recorded. And no matter how far you drive, how fast you move, how loudly you cry, The dead zone waits. Patient, immovable, and utterly aware. I had been driving for hours, though I wasn't sure exactly how long. The night was heavy, black like a curtain draped over the world. And the only light came from the faint glow of my headlights and the reflective strips on the asphalt. The highway stretched out in front of me endlessly, straight and unbroken, as if it had been laid across the world to trap me in some infinite loop. Then I saw them. Faint, red, glowing lights in the distance. Brake lights. Far ahead, tiny but impossible to ignore. I slowed, instinctively, heart tightening. Another car on this stretch of road should have been a relief. A sign that I wasn't completely alone. But the way the lights hung there, unmoving, made my skin crawl. I eased my foot off the accelerator, trying to gauge the distance. The lights didn't get any closer. They didn't move. And when I tapped the horn lightly, nothing happened. No reaction from the car ahead, no flicker of headlights, nothing. It was like the vehicle was frozen in place, waiting. I forced myself to take a deep breath. Rational thought. There had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe the driver had pulled over. Maybe they were having car trouble. Maybe they hadn't noticed me. But something about the way the lights remained suspended in the blackness felt deliberate, calculated, watching. I tapped the horn again, harder this time, my pulse spiking. Still nothing. My knuckles whitened on the wheel. I considered turning off the road, taking an exit, going back the way I had come. But the highway behind me was wrong. Faded, blurred. Shadows seemed to stretch where there had been guardrails. And I had the sudden, sinking realization that the road I thought I'd traveled might not even exist anymore. I glanced in the rear view mirror. Empty. Not a single car behind me. Not a hint of headlights. No fading tail lights in the distance. Nothing. Just black. The only light came from the red dots ahead. That shouldn't have been possible. This was a major highway. There should have been traffic. Trucks. Other cars. Noise. Life. Instead, there was silence. And the red lights, just ahead, unmoving, waiting. I shifted gears slowly, trying to close the distance. My hands were shaking slightly, fingers curling around the wheel. I felt like I was being drawn forward, unable to stop, trapped by some magnetic pull I couldn't see or resist. The brake lights didn't blink. They didn't move. They didn't even reflect the occasional flicker of the wet asphalt beneath my tires. A thought struck me suddenly. Maybe it wasn't a car. Maybe it was something else. My chest tightened, a cold pressure spreading from my stomach up to my throat. The night seemed to lean in closer, pressing against the windshield. I could feel the darkness moving in the corners of my vision, stretching the shadows along the tree line. I tried to reassure myself. Maybe I was tired. Maybe my mind was playing tricks after hours of driving. But the rational thought didn't stick. Every instinct in me screamed that the lights were aware, that they knew I was there, that they were waiting for me. I increased my speed slightly, desperate to pass. The road ahead remained straight, impossibly straight, the tail lights unwavering. The air in the car felt thicker, heavier, as if it had weight. My breath came in shallow gasps. I tried to tell myself it was just fog or mist, something natural. But the night was clear. No fog, just darkness, endless black and red lights. I tapped the horn again, long and insistent. Nothing. I leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. The lights didn't move. They didn't react. And for a moment, a terrible thought entered my mind. Maybe they weren't meant to move. Maybe they weren't alive. Maybe they were a lure, a trap. I glanced at the speedometer. I had been creeping up steadily, trying to close the distance. But no matter how fast I went, the lights stayed the same distance ahead. My stomach twisted, my hands shaking on the wheel. How could a car remain so far away, so perfectly still, as if it was tied to me, controlling my path, forcing me forward? My mind raced. I thought about stopping, parking on the shoulder, turning on the hazards, trying to call someone. But the road behind me was empty, silent, and as I glanced back again, something I hadn't noticed before made my blood run cold. The shoulder was wrong. Shadows pulled unnaturally along the edge, stretching across the lane lines in ways they shouldn't. The guardrails bent subtly, as if warped, bending toward me slightly, curving impossibly with no explanation. I gripped the wheel tighter, heart hammering. I had to get past the lights. I had to escape whatever this was. But the road seemed endless, and the lights, they waited, patient, silent, perfectly still. I pushed the accelerator, desperate, willing the car to move faster. The engine roared, tires gripping the wet asphalt. But the distance of the lights didn't change. It was impossible. I was gaining nothing. And then I noticed something smaller, almost imperceptible. The brake lights ahead pulsed, a slow, steady blink, like a heartbeat, but not a human heartbeat. Wrong. Mechanical, calculated, malicious. A cold sweat ran down my back. I wanted to scream. I wanted to turn, to flee, to abandon reason and logic entirely. But the highway behind me was nothing. Empty, impossible, dead. The lights ahead, pulsing, drawing me forward, seemed alive in some way that defied sense. I tried to reason. Maybe it was a truck, stopped ahead with its brake lights on. Maybe it had broken down. But something in the rhythm of the pulse, the stillness of the vehicle, the way the night pressing on me, told me otherwise. This was deliberate. The red lights were aware of me, waiting for me, leading me, trapping me. I slowed slightly, just to catch my breath, to think, but slowing didn't help. The lights maintained their distance, pulsed steady, unwavering. My mind screamed for escape. I tried to find a landmark, a turn, anything familiar. Nothing. The highway stretched endlessly, straight and black, lined with trees that bent in subtly unnatural ways. The asphalt shimmered under my headlights, wet and reflective, and I realized with a shiver that I had no idea how far I'd driven, no memory of passing any exit signs or markers. Panic started to rise. The pulse of the brake lights seemed to sync with my own heartbeat. I could feel it in my chest, in my temples, in the hollow pit of my stomach. The car behind the lights, or the lights themselves, were dictating my rhythm, my motion, my fear. Every instinct told me to swerve, to run, to abandon logic entirely. But where could I go? There was no shoulder large enough to escape. No exit ramps. Nothing. Just me, the red lights, and the endless black highway stretching into infinity. I thought about turning off my headlights, hoping to confuse whatever it was. But as soon as I flicked the switch, the lights ahead brightened slightly, almost as if they responded, mocking me. My breath came faster. Panic threatening to consume me completely. My hands shook on the wheel. My teeth ground together as I realized there was no escape. The road, the night, the lights. They had me, and I was powerless. Hours could have passed, or minutes. Time had no meaning here. The brake lights remained in front of me, pulsing slowly, steadily, deliberately. The road stretched endlessly. No other cars existed. The night was quiet except for the steady hum of my tires on asphalt and the oppressive, unyielding presence of the lights ahead. I forced myself to breathe, to stay calm, to think. But reason was slipping, melting under the weight of the impossible. The highway was no longer a path. It was a trap. The lights weren't just ahead. They were the trap itself, patient, alive, waiting, and I had no choice but to follow. I glanced in the rear view mirror one last time. Empty, silent, nothing but black stretching into infinity. And I realized with a sinking certainty that the red lights ahead were not just a vehicle. They were something else entirely. Something that had been waiting for me, waiting for anyone. Something that existed to guide, to trap, to ensure that the highway would never end and that I would never escape. The road stretched endlessly before me. The brake lights pulsed steadily, patiently. And I drove forward, heart hammering, knowing that I was trapped in a night that would never end, guided by lights that were alive, aware and watching. The rain started as a light drizzle, barely enough to coat the windshield, but within minutes it became a downpour, hammering against the glass with a steady, insistent rhythm. The wipers struggled to keep up, leaving smeared trails that distorted the road ahead into ribbons of silver and gray. Every beam of my headlights scattered in the sheets of water, turning familiar asphalt into a shifting, uncertain surface. I tightened my grip on the wheel, knuckles white. The endless red lights from the night before were gone, vanished as mysteriously as they had appeared. but the dread they left in their wake remained heavy and sticky in my chest. I tried to focus on the road, the painted lines, the occasional reflector marking the edge, but the rain blurred everything into one endless smear of darkness and wet sheen. That's when I first saw the shadows. Under the first overpass, where the concrete loomed like a monolith, I thought I glimpsed something moving, quick, subtle, darting from pillar to pillar. At first I convinced myself it was just my imagination. The rain created shapes in the darkness, and tired eyes often played tricks. But then, as I drove slowly under the structure, the shadows shifted in ways that didn't make sense, moving against the flow of the wind and the sheets of rain. My pulse quickened. I slowed the car, careful to keep it steady on the slick asphalt. The shadows didn't disappear. They lingered at the edge of my vision, writhing just enough to suggest motion. Every time I turned my head to look directly, nothing was there, but when I returned my gaze to the road ahead, a flicker of movement teased the corner of my eyes, teasing and insistent. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I was tired. I told myself I had been driving too long through the dead zone, and my mind was starting to fray, but every instinct screamed. Otherwise, something was watching, waiting, patiently, silently, just beyond the reach of my headlights. Then the rain got heavier, a curtain of water that erased the road ahead almost entirely. The wipers moved as fast as they could, but the view remained distorted. The lines bleeding into each other, the reflections of headlights and street signs fractured like broken glass. I slowed even more, gripping the wheel like a lifeline, heart hammering against my ribs. That's when I noticed the headlights. Far ahead, in the downpour, another pair of lights appeared, following the road with me. At first, I thought it was another car, another driver, but the way the lights maintained their distance, perfectly aligned with mine, unnerved me. No car should follow so closely in weather like this, not without signaling, not without swerving slightly for the curves and puddles. But these lights moved with eerie precision, matching every slight adjustment of my steering, every tap of my brakes, every hesitant acceleration. My pulse jumped. I tried to shake the feeling, to convince myself it was coincidence. Maybe it was a truck just trying to stay in my lane, visibility reduced by the rain. But the more I tried to rationalize, the less sense it made. The lights didn't overtake me. They didn't swerve. They just followed, patient, unblinking, unyielding. I glanced in the rearview mirror. The lights were there, and yet they weren't. Not fully. The reflection was distorted in the wet glass, broken into fragments that didn't quite line up with reality. Every time I looked away, they seemed to shift, appearing closer or farther depending on the angle of my eyes. It was impossible. Physics wouldn't allow it. And yet, there they were, under the next overpass. The shadows moved again, faster this time, and I could swear they were converging toward the road, slipping in the dark like smoke over water. My stomach lurched. I wanted to look away, to close my eyes, to pretend none of this was real. But some part of me, some part driven by fear and fascination, couldn't. I had to see. I had to understand. The rain intensified, hitting the roof with a relentless percussion. Every sound was amplified inside the car. The wipers, the tires cutting through puddles, the dull thrum of the engine. But underneath it all, I could hear something else. A low murmur, almost indistinct, like voices carried through the storm. Whispering, but not in any language I recognized. Just a breath, a hiss, a pressure in the air that made my skin crawl. I tried to focus on the road, eyes straining, but the headlights ahead never wavered. They weren't swerving to avoid me, not reacting to curves, not responding to the slick asphalt. They moved as if tethered, as if the vehicle they belonged to was not alive in the way I understood living things. And I realized with a sinking certainty that no rational explanation could account for what I was seeing. The shadows under the overpasses started to take shape, not fully formed, just hints, flickers of human outlines, limbs bent in impossible angles, faces turned away or hidden entirely in blackness. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. My breath came in shallow gasps, fogging the windshield inside the car. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to drive back, to escape the highway entirely, but the road stretched endlessly in both directions. I pressed my foot to the accelerator, hoping to put distance between myself and whatever was there. The car moved, tires cutting through standing water, wipers thrashing violently, but the headlights ahead mirrored me, maintaining their exact distance. No deviation, no variation, just pursuit. The rain blurred everything. Trees melted into darkness. Guardrails disappeared under sheets of water, and every reflective sign became a ghostly smear of light. I could barely see, and yet, in the blur, I could feel them. Those shadows, moving just at the edge of perception, slipping through the mist like predators. I reached for the radio, desperate for any distraction, any human voice, any connection to the world outside this nightmare. I switched it on, static filling the cabin before the first crackle station came through. A dispatcher was reporting a minor accident up ahead. A car spun out of control. I froze. My stomach churned. Every detail described in the broadcast matched what I had just driven past. The same curve, the same slick patch, the same ruined guardrail. I gripped the wheel tighter, hands trembling. I tried to remind myself it was coincidence, but the pulse in my chest, the rhythm of the windshield wipers, the synchronization of headlights ahead, it wasn't coincidence. It was anticipation. They were following, but more than that, they were waiting for me to make a mistake, waiting for me to drive too fast, to look away, to falter. The shadows under the next overpass shifted again, more deliberate this time. I saw hints of movement in the peripheral vision, shapes crossing the road, just far enough to blur in the rain. One figure, or something like a figure, rose slowly from the darkness, tall and thin, limbs bending at odd angles. My heart slammed. I forced my eyes to look directly, and it vanished instantly, leaving only the blur of rain and asphalt. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to breathe. Logic told me it couldn't exist. The mind plays tricks in weather like this, in isolation like this, at night like this. But the instinct in me, primal, raw, screaming, told me it was real. Not a trick, not a hallucination. Real, watching, waiting. I tried with the lights ahead to go away, to vanish, to stop following, but they didn't. Every turn, every small adjustment of my steering, every shift in speed, they mirrored me perfectly, as if mocking my fear. I was trapped in a loop, a dance dictated by something beyond reason, something patient and deliberate. And through it all, the rain continued, relentless, obscuring, blurring. The windshield turned into a canvas of water, reflection, and shadow. My mind felt unmoored, each second stretching impossibly long, each heartbeat amplified, echoing in the tight confines of the car. The shadows and headlights existed in tandem, synchronized in some cruel pattern I couldn't decipher. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to bone, that I wasn't alone. I had never been alone. The rain, the shadows, the lights, they had been waiting, observing, testing me. Every instinct screamed that I had no control, that nothing I did mattered. I was a passenger in a story already written, guided by unseen hands, chased by things that should not exist in any reasonable world. And yet I kept driving, because stopping wasn't an option. Not really. Not when the shadows seemed to bend closer with every hesitation. Not when the headlights mirrored me so perfectly I began to doubt my own reflexes. Every choice, every breath, every turn was anticipated. Every instinct manipulated. Every heartbeat recorded in the rhythm of the rain. I didn't know how long I drove like that. Hours, maybe minutes. Time had lost all meaning. But the rain never stopped. The shadows never disappeared. And the lights remained patient, relentless, unblinking. And I understood, in that moment of drenched, trembling clarity, that the highway wasn't just a road. It was alive, watching, waiting. And I was already trapped in its design, caught between rain-blur reality and impossible shadows, pursued by headlights that should have been ordinary but were anything but. I drove on. The rain was relentless, hammering the roof and hood of the car in a steady, insistent drumbeat that made my nerves feel raw. My wipers worked furiously, leaving streaks of water that warped the road into something unreal. Every painted line blurred into the asphalt. Every reflector became a ghostly flicker. I felt like I was driving inside a painting, one that had been smeared and stretched by the storm. Then it happened. Something appeared out of nowhere. A dark shape on the road, just ahead, barely visible through the sheets of rain. My heart leapt into my throat. I slammed on the brakes, tires screaming against the slick pavement, and swerved violently toward the shoulder. The car fishtailed, but I managed to regain control, my hands trembling on the wheel, breath coming in ragged gasps. I slowed, peering through the rain, straining to see what I had almost hit, but there was nothing. No animal, no debris, no other vehicle. Just wet asphalt, stretching endlessly, glistening under the headlights. And yet, the terror I felt was real, so real that my hand shook for minutes after, gripping the wheel like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to the world. I eased onto the shoulder, the tires crunching slightly against the gravel, my pulse still racing. I forced myself to look around. That's when I noticed the tire marks. They were fresh, deep in the mud and gravel, cutting a path from the edge of the road into the darkness. But the strange thing, they didn't lead anywhere. They disappeared after a few feet, fading into nothing, as if the vehicle had simply vanished into thin air. I leaned out slightly, squinting into the rain, trying to make sense of it. The air smelled damp and metallic, the taste of it thick on my tongue. My mind raced with explanations. Maybe a car had spun off the road and someone had dragged it. Maybe the storm had distorted my perception. Maybe I was losing it. But nothing felt right. Not the road, not the disappearing tire tracks, not the way the rain seemed to fall heavier right over them. I shook my head, trying to convince myself I was imagining things. I climbed back into the car, slamming the door, and started the engine. The headlights caught something in the mist just beyond the shoulder, a smear of darkness that shifted as I moved, subtle, almost imperceptible. My stomach knotted, my hands gripping the wheel until the knuckles were white. Driving slowly, I followed the edge of the road, trying to keep my eyes on the strange marks. Every time I looked, I thought I saw more. Tracks that shouldn't exist, patterns that defied logic, curves in the asphalt that hadn't been there before. It was like the highway itself was alive, reshaping itself under the rain, manipulating my perception, bending reality around me. Then the headlights ahead, another pair, appeared again, glowing through the sheets of water. They weren't moving faster than me. They weren't swerving or reacting to my speed. They simply followed, silent, patient, unblinking. The red glow cut through the mist, perfectly synchronized with my own pace. I swallowed hard, heart hammering. I had to remind myself to breathe, to think, to stay rational. But reason was slipping. The road stretched endlessly. The shoulder disappeared, and the rain became a thick, tactile presence, pressing against the windshield and my skin. It felt alive, aware. And the tire tracks. They seemed to pulse in rhythm with the wipers, with my heartbeat, with the very motion of the car. I thought about leaving, turning back, escaping the stretch of highway that had grown impossibly long and twisted in the storm. But the road behind me didn't exist. Or at least, it didn't feel real. There were no guardrails, no exit signs, no other vehicles. Only darkness and rain, and the relentless pulse of headlights following me. I forced my eyes back to the shoulder. There, the tire tracks. They were deeper now, as if the rain had pressed them further into gravel. But they still led nowhere. My stomach turned at the thought that whatever had made them hadn't needed a road, that it had simply vanished, leaving proof that it had been there, that it had been real, yet denying any explanation for its disappearance. I eased back onto the asphalt, trying to drive normally, trying to convince myself that I was safe. But the headlights followed, unwavering, and then I saw something move in the mist near the edge of the road. Something tall and thin, almost human, but wrong. The rain distorted it, stretched it, twisted its limbs into angles no living being could sustain. I blinked, and it was gone. Gone like the tire tracks, like the phantom I had almost collided with. Gone, but still present, still waiting in my peripheral vision. I felt a shiver crawl up my spine. My hands tightened on the wheel. My breath came in short, shallow gasps. The rain had become oppressive, not just a storm, but a weight pressing against me. A presence that filled the car, seeped into my ears, my chest, my skull. The wipers beat back the water, but they couldn't clear it from my mind. I tried to focus, to rationalize, to remember that I had survived worse stretches of this highway before. But the logic faltered under the rhythm of the lights, the shifting shadows, the tire tracks that defied explanation. I could feel them watching me. The road itself seemed aware, anticipating my every movement, every hesitation. Every flicker of the wipers revealed something new, a subtle shift in the dark shapes of the edge of the asphalt. I slowed to a crawl, gripping the wheel like it was my only anchor to sanity. My heart hammered. My chest felt tight, constricted, as if the rain itself were compressing me against the seat. And then I heard it. A faint scrape like metal against gravel, coming from the shoulder just beyond the tire marks. My stomach dropped. My pulse leapt. I dared to glance out the side window. Nothing. Just rain, dark trees, the wet asphalt reflecting my headlights. And yet, the sound persisted, soft, deliberate, dragging across the shoulder in a rhythm that echoed the pulse of the red lights behind me. I gripped the wheel tighter, trying to convince myself it was just a storm, just my imagination, just exhaustion. But the instinct in me, primal and undeniable, screamed otherwise. Something had been there. Something had left those marks. And something had not gone. The headlights behind me moved ever so slightly closer. I dared not speed up. I dared not slow down. Every adjustment, every micro-correction, the wheels seemed to be mirrored, anticipated. The red glow behind me pulsed in harmony with my own heartbeat. I realized with a sinking certainty that the driver, or whatever it was, knew my every move before I made it. I tried to shake the fear, tried to rationalize, tried to convince myself that tire tracks leading nowhere were just puddles, reflections, or debris washed away by the rain. But no explanation fit. The shape I had almost hit, the impossible tracks, the unblinking headlights, they all contradicted reality itself. And yet they existed. Proof of something beyond reason, beyond escape. I drove on, hands trembling, eyes darting to every shadow, every curve of the asphalt, every glimmer of something that shouldn't be there. And the rain didn't stop. It never stopped. It fell in sheets, relentless, obscuring, transforming the world into a liquid nightmare. The tire tracks remained at the shoulder, as fresh and unnatural as before, fading into nothing, leaving only the suggestion that something had been there, and that it was still close, still watching, still waiting. Every mile stretched endlessly. The red lights followed, pulsed steady, patient, unyielding. Shadows shifted just beyond visibility. The rain hammered the car, and I understood with a terror that settled deep in my bones that I was no longer driving on a road. I was moving inside a trap, a corridor designed by something deliberate, something aware. The tire tracks, the shadow, the lights, they were all part of it, and I was being observed, guided, hunted. I couldn't stop. Stopping would be surrender. Stopping would be giving it what it wanted. But driving forward didn't help either. The road looped endlessly under the storm, the tire marks never leading anywhere, the shadows never ceasing, the lights never blinking, never turning away. And as the windshield blurred with rain and fear, I realized there was no escape. The collision I had avoided had been the warning, not the threat. The tire tracks were not evidence of the past, but a promise of what would come if I faltered. The storm, the road, the headlights, they had claimed me, and no rational thought, no speed, no attempt to flee could change that. I drove on. I fumbled for my phone, fingers slick with rain and shaking from the storm, from the headlights, from the impossible tire tracks that led nowhere. My hands barely worked the buttons, and I could feel the tension coiling in my chest, making each heartbeat feel like a drum echoing in a vast, empty space. All I wanted was someone, anyone, to tell me this was just a nightmare, to ground me in reality. I dialed 911, desperate, certain that help, real help, was out there somewhere. The line clicked, and then there was a voice, a dispatcher, calm, professional, but strained. That should have reassured me, but it didn't. Not at all. 911, what's your emergency? I swallowed hard, the words barely forming. There's been an accident on Highway 47. I think someone could be hurt. My voice wavered as the rain pounded the roof, drowning out my own words at times. I need help. Please. The voice on the other end paused for a moment, and then, slowly, began speaking. But what it said didn't make sense. Yes, I see it. The black sedan. Overturned near mile marker 22. Tire tracks rain. God, the rain. I froze. The words were eerily specific. I'd mentioned the highway, the rain, the tire tracks. Yes, but that was it. I hadn't said anything about a black sedan or mile markers. My mind stumbled over itself. Wait, what? Are you talking about what just happened? There was a sigh, low, heavy, almost a groan. It's already happened. Years ago, July of 2018. We found the driver, but it's impossible. The rain, the highway. I felt the phone tremble in my hands, wet and slick, as if the line itself had absorbed my fear. My pulse slammed. What are you talking about? I'm on Highway 47 right now. This just happened. There was tire marks. Something was there. My voice cracked under the weight of panic, under the disbelief clawing at me. The dispatcher's voice didn't change. It was calm but hollow, like a recording or like a person speaking through a veil of time. I've been hearing it on the radio, static warnings we respond, but it's always too late. The driver was never found. I blinked, struggling to process the words. Wait, you're telling me this happened years ago? Yes, years ago. The line went silent for a moment. Only the sound of rain came through, pounding harder, faster, almost in rhythm with my own heartbeat. Then the voice returned, softer, almost a whisper. And yet here you are. I dropped the phone slightly, shaking it to clear my hands, but the voice stayed, echoing, insistent. I don't understand what you're saying. The dispatcher's tone shifted subtly, strange, warped. The highway it doesn't forget. The rain it remembers. Every crash, every scream, every tire mark. It records them, and sometimes it plays them back. I pressed the phone harder to my ear, sweat and rain soaking through my clothes. My throat was dry. You're saying this is some kind of loop? My voice trembled. That the accidents repeat? A faint laugh, brittle and hollow, came through the line. Repeat? No, not repeat. Reappear. Different drivers. Different years. But the same road. The same hunger. I stumbled backward in the car, gripping the wheel for balance. Hunger? The word ricocheted in my mind like a bell, resonating with everything I'd seen. The shadows, the headlights, the tire tracks that led nowhere. Hunger for what? For fear? For death? For witnesses? My pulse raced. My vision blurred through the streaked windshield. I don't understand, I said. My voice was small, almost a plea. You're telling me this isn't real? The voice on the other end softened, impossibly sad. It's real, but not as you understand reality. The highway it collects, it consumes, it waits, it shapes what it will, then lets them go, or doesn't. The accidents, the crashes, they are its memory. And sometimes someone drives along, unaware, and it decides to show itself. I gripped the phone tighter, shaking. The headlights behind me flashed through the rain, perfectly synchronized again, patient, unblinking. Shadows flicker at the edges of the overpasses, warped, impossible shapes bending in angles my brain couldn't comprehend. My stomach roiled. The road had become something else, something alive, and I was inside it. I just want to get home. I whispered. My voice trembled as tears blurred my vision. I just want to leave this highway. You can try, the dispatcher said softly, but the highway does not let go. Once you see it, once you touch it, it marks you. The tire tracks, the lights, the shadows, they're all waiting for the next turn, the next pause, the next mistake. It feeds on the fear, and sometimes it feeds before it lets you continue. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to focus on the road. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to drive faster, to escape the storm, the lights, the shadows. But the tires on the slick asphalt gripped just enough to keep me moving, but not enough to get me away. I was trapped, caught in a corridor of rain and dread. The dispatcher continued, calm and detached, like someone reciting events long past. We responded years ago to mile marker 22. The sedan overturned, driver never found, tire marks led nowhere, rain obscured the truth. We thought it was a single event, but the highway remembers differently. It shows what it wants. And sometimes it lets witnesses survive just to remember. I shook my head, trying to clear it, trying to force sense into the nonsense. I'm driving. I'm right here. It's happening to me now. There was a long pause. I could hear the rain pounding harder, the wipers thrashing violently, the engine humming beneath my hands. And then the voice whispered, almost a breath in my ear, "Yes, yes, and now it will remember you." The words froze me. My chest tightened. My vision narrowed to the red glow in the distance, to the distorted shadows at the edge of the asphalt, to the tire marks in the shoulder that led nowhere. My stomach dropped. I felt a chill crawl along my spine, so intense it burned. I understood in that instant that nothing I did mattered. The highway had me. It had marked me. And the voice had confirmed it. I gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles white, trying to force my eyes to focus. But the headlights continued to follow. The shadows continued to flicker. The rain continued to pour. The phone trembled in my hands, wet and alive, still connected to a dispatcher who was speaking from a past that collided with my present in ways that made no sense. "You'll see it again," the dispatcher said softly. "The accidents, the crashes, the screams, all part of the memory, all part of the record. And sometimes, it lets the next driver witness the truth." I couldn't respond. My voice was gone, swallowed by fear and rain, by the impossibility of what I was hearing and living. The road stretched endlessly, slick and shining, a corridor of memory and shadow, and the headlights remained tethered to me in a rhythm I could not escape. I realized then that the highway had been waiting for me, that it had already decided my path, that the tire tracks, the phantom lights, the impossible accidents, all was part of a story I had stumbled into, a story that didn't care about logic, about time, about survival. I swallowed hard, forcing a breath through a dry throat. The dispatcher's voice had gone quiet, leaving only the rain, the wipers, the engine, and the unblinking lights behind me. But I could feel the words still echoing in my mind, etched into my thoughts, impossible to erase. The highway remembers. It marks you, and it waits. I drove on, rain blurring the road, tire tracks fading into nothing, shadows bending at the edges of reality, lights following with patient precision. The 911 call hadn't saved me. It hadn't warned me. It had only confirmed it. The highway had chosen me, and I was trapped inside its memory, part of the record. Another witness to something beyond reason, beyond escape, beyond time. And as the windshield streaked with rain, as the headlights glowed in the distance behind me, as the shadows whispered at the edges of perception, I understood the highway wasn't just a road. It was alive. It was patient. And it would remember me forever. I drove on. The rain had been relentless for hours, a constant drum that rattled the roof of my car and washed the world into a blur of gray. Headlights reflected off the slick asphalt, stretching into long, liquid streaks that made the median look like a river of molten silver. I had been driving for what felt like forever, though the signs told me I was barely halfway home. My hands were tight on the wheel, knuckles white, every muscle coiled with tension. That's when I first heard it, the faint whisper over the radio. I had the local station on, static dancing between songs, the usual monotone voice of the DJ. But underneath it, low and almost imperceptible, there was a sound that made my skin crawl. My name, JJ Alex. I jerked the dial, twisting the knob to adjust the volume, to kill whatever was in my head, but it persisted, barely louder than a breath, repeating again and again, "Alex, Alex." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "It's just the storm interference," I muttered to myself. I told myself I was imagining it, that fatigue and the rain were playing tricks on my mind. My eyes stayed glued to the road, scanning the median and the tree line beyond. Everything was gray, wet, and indistinct, but then the shadows started to flicker. They danced in the faint glow of the median reflectors, bending and stretching as if the rain itself had become alive. I blinked, trying to focus, and when I looked again, The shapes seemed to move closer. Not fast, not with a speed that could be measured, but in a slow, deliberate glide, sliding across the rain-soaked asphalt. My pulse spiked. I gripped the wheel tighter. I'm losing it. I whispered, I'm losing it. The whisper came again, clearer this time, closer to the speaker, not on the radio, but around me, echoing in the cars of someone or something were sitting just behind my seat. Alex. I tried to shout, to tell myself to pull over, but my voice came out as a strained rasp. The rain pounded harder, filling my ears, drowning out my own thoughts. I couldn't tell if the sound was inside my head or outside. The shadows danced again, and my peripheral vision caught shapes I didn't want to name. I forced my eyes forward, trying to keep the road in focus. The median glistened wet, the paint lines melting into the asphalt, and there it was, a figure, small, dark, impossible to make out in detail, standing in the center of the median, not moving but somehow present, watching me. I blinked, and it was gone. My stomach churned. Every instinct screamed at me to turn the car around, to leave this stretch of road, but the highway seemed endless, curving back on itself like it had no exit. My tires hissed on the wet asphalt as I slowed, scanning the edges for anything familiar, but familiarity had vanished. The rain turned the world into a smear of gray and black, punctuated only by the flicker of shadows and the faint, repetitive whisper of my name. Alex, Alex. I shut my eyes for a second, forcing myself to breathe. Logic tried to settle my mind. It's rain. It's static. It's exhaustion. But the rational part of my brain was screaming against something older, darker, something that didn't want to be explained. I opened my eyes. Another shadow flickered in the median, longer this time, stretching out like a finger across the wet paint. My heart lurched. I could feel the fear settle deep in my chest, spreading, coiling around my stomach, my lungs, my spine. I couldn't look away. I wanted to, but my eyes were glued to the motion, hypnotized by something that wasn't real, or was it? The whisper came again, layered now. More voices joining in. Not just mine, not just a single call, but dozens of fragmented syllables overlapping. I couldn't tell what they were saying, except the parts one recognized. My name, repeated, called over and over. I slammed the radio off, but the voices didn't stop. They were inside the car now, inside my head, crawling along the edges of my thoughts. I shook my head violently, trying to clear them, and the shadows danced even faster, writhing in shapes that were vaguely human but horribly wrong. Limbs bent in unnatural angles, heads tilted in ways that defied anatomy, faces blurred and smeared like wet charcoal. I couldn't breathe properly. I was hyper-aware of every sound. The rain, the tires slicing through puddles, the faint whispers that seemed to shift as I moved. Every glance at the median revealed a new figure, a new shadow. Some crouched, some stretched tall, some were twisted beyond recognition, all of them staring at me, and all silent except for the chorus of my name echoing through the storm. I tried to scream, to call for help, but my voice failed. My hand shook violently on the wheel. Every nerve in my body screamed to get away, to turn, to escape, but the road itself seemed to pulse beneath me, endless, wet, unyielding. The shadows stayed, flickering, multiplying, stretching along the median as if mocking my inability to leave. The whispering became more insistent, almost impatient. Alex, Alex, Alex. And then I noticed the shapes in the rear-view mirror, not behind me, but within the car itself, faint reflections, shadows in the back seat that didn't belong. I could feel eyes on me from every angle. My heart threatened to burst from my chest. Every instinct told me to stop, to abandon the car, to run screaming into the rain, but the highway seemed to have no edges, no exit, no mercy. I reached for the radio, desperate, trying to call out, to reconnect with some sense of reason, some lifeline. I pressed buttons randomly, listening for static, for someone, for anything that could tell me I wasn't losing my mind completely. And through the interference, I thought I heard it. A voice, familiar but distorted, almost human. Do you see us? The words were simple, quiet, and yet they carried an unbearable weight. I glanced at the median again, and the shadows no longer flickered. They froze, elongated, each one pointing toward the car, toward me. Every instinct screamed that I should drive faster, that I should escape, but it was useless. The road stretched endlessly ahead and behind, twisting, folding back on itself. I was trapped in a corridor of rain, shadow, and sound, and I knew that the figures, the whispers, were aware of every movement I made. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to keep my eyes forward. But every glance at the mirrors or the edge of the median revealed a new horror. A shadow with impossibly long arms. Another crouched unnaturally low. Another with a face that shimmered like wet metal, just beyond clarity. And always my name. Alex, Alex. I tried to tell myself it was exhaustion, the storm, the isolation. But deep down I knew better. The voices weren't random. The shadows weren't mistakes. This stretch of road, this storm, this night, they were alive, and I was not driving through it. It was moving through me, around me, watching me, marking me. I gripped the wheel so tightly my knuckles burned, every nerve screaming. My eyes flicked between the road, the median, the mirrors, and the windshield streaked with rain. And then, in a blink, I noticed something impossible. The shadows weren't just in the median. They were everywhere, reflected in the puddles, cast on the rain itself, etched across the darkness like a black veil. My name was whispered from all directions now, echoing, overlapping, fracturing. I swallowed, forcing my chest to expand, my lungs to fill. The fear clawed at me, insistent, sharp, alive. But still I drove, forward, through the rain, through the endless whispering, through the flickering, impossible shadows. I had no choice. Stopping meant surrender. Surrender meant something worse. I don't know how long I drove like that. Minutes, hours, maybe even days. The storm seemed endless, the shadows infinite, the voices eternal. Every glance at the median revealed new shapes. Every blink brought another whisper. Every heartbeat felt like it might be my last. And as the rain poured, as the shadows flickered and stretched, as my name was whispered in every direction, I understood one terrible truth. I was no longer alone on the road. Not really. JJ Alex. I jerked the dial, twisting the knob to adjust the volume, to kill whatever was in my head, but it persisted, barely louder than a breath, repeating again and again, Alex, Alex. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. It's just the storm interference, I muttered to myself. I told myself I was imagining it, that fatigue and the rain were playing tricks on my mind. My eyes stayed glued to the road, scanning the median and the tree line beyond. Everything was gray, wet, and indistinct, but then the shadows started to flicker. They danced in the faint glow of the median reflectors, bending and stretching as if the rain itself had become alive. I blinked, trying to focus, and when I looked again, the shapes seemed to move closer. Not fast, not with a speed that could be measured, but in a slow, deliberate glide, sliding across the rain-soaked asphalt. My pulse spiked. I gripped the wheel tighter. I'm losing it. I whispered, I'm losing it. The whisper came again, clearer this time, closer to the speaker, not on the radio, but around me, echoing in the cars of someone or something were sitting just behind my seat. Alex. I tried to shout, to tell myself to pull over, but my voice came out as a strained rasp. The rain pounded harder, filling my ears, drowning out my own thoughts. I couldn't tell if the sound was inside my head or outside. The shadows danced again, and my peripheral vision caught shapes I didn't want to name. I forced my eyes forward, trying to keep the road in focus. The median glistened wet, the paint lines melting into the asphalt, and there it was, a figure, small, dark, impossible to make out in detail, standing in the center of a median, not moving but somehow present, watching me. I blinked, and it was gone. My stomach churned. Every instinct screamed at me to turn the car around, to leave the stretch of road, but the highway seemed endless, curving back on itself like it had no exit. My tires hissed on the wet asphalt as I slowed, scanning the edges for anything familiar, but familiarity had vanished. The rain turned the world into a smear of gray and black. punctuated only by the flicker of shadows and the faint, repetitive whisper of my name. Alex, Alex. I shut my eyes for a second, forcing myself to breathe. Logic tried to settle my mind. It's rain. It's static. It's exhaustion. But the rational part of my brain was screaming against something older, darker, something that didn't want to be explained. I opened my eyes. Another shadow flickered in the median, longer this time, stretching out like a finger across the wet paint. My heart lurched. I could feel the fear settle deep in my chest, spreading, coiling around my stomach, my lungs, my spine. I couldn't look away. I wanted to, but my eyes were glued to the motion, hypnotized by something that wasn't real, or was it? The whisper came again, layered now. More voices joining in. Not just mine, not just a single call, but dozens of fragmented syllables overlapping. I couldn't tell what they were saying, except the parts one recognized. My name, repeated, called over and over. I slammed the radio off, but the voices didn't stop. They were inside the car now, inside my head, crawling along the edges of my thoughts. I shook my head violently, trying to clear them, and the shadows danced even faster, writhing in shapes that were vaguely human but horribly wrong. Limbs bent in unnatural angles, heads tilted in ways that defied anatomy, faces blurred and smeared like wet charcoal. I couldn't breathe properly. I was hyper-aware of every sound. The rain, the tires slicing through puddles, the faint whispers that seemed to shift as I moved. Every glance at the median revealed a new figure, a new shadow. Some crouched, some stretched tall, some were twisted beyond recognition, all of them staring at me, and all silent except for the chorus of my name echoing through the storm. I tried to scream, to call for help, but my voice failed. My hands shook violently on the wheel. Every nerve in my body screamed to get away, to turn, to escape, but the road itself seemed to pulse beneath me, endless, wet, unyielding. The shadows stayed, flickering, multiplying, stretching along the median as if mocking my inability to leave. The whispering became more insistent, almost impatient. Alex, Alex, Alex. And then I noticed the shapes in the rear-view mirror, not behind me, but within the car itself, faint reflections, shadows in the back seat that didn't belong. I could feel eyes on me from every angle. My heart threatened to burst from my chest. Every instinct told me to stop, to abandon the car, to run screaming into the rain, but the highway seemed to have no edges, no exit, no mercy. I reached for the radio, desperate, trying to call out, to reconnect with some sense of reason, some lifeline. I pressed buttons randomly, listening for static, for someone, for anything that could tell me I wasn't losing my mind completely. And through the interference, I thought I heard it. A voice, familiar but distorted, almost human. Do you see us? The words were simple, quiet, and yet they carried an unbearable weight. I glanced at the median again, and the shadows no longer flickered. They froze, elongated, each one pointing toward the car, toward me. Every instinct screamed that I should drive faster, that I should escape, but it was useless. The road stretched endlessly ahead and behind, twisting, folding back on itself. I was trapped in a corridor of rain, shadow, and sound, and I knew that the figures, the whispers, were aware of every movement I made. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to keep my eyes forward. But every glance at the mirrors or the edge of the median revealed a new horror. A shadow with impossibly long arms. Another crouched unnaturally low. Another with a face that shimmered like wet metal, just beyond clarity. And always, always my name. Alex, Alex. I tried to tell myself it was exhaustion, the storm, the isolation. But deep down I knew better. The voices weren't random. The shadows weren't mistakes. This stretch of road, this storm, this night, they were alive, and I was not driving through it. It was moving through me, around me, watching me, marking me. I gripped the wheel so tightly my knuckles burned, every nerve screaming. My eyes flicked between the road, the median, the mirrors, and the windshield streaked with rain. And then, in a blink, I noticed something impossible. The shadows weren't just in the median. They were everywhere, reflected in the puddles, cast on the rain itself, etched across the darkness like a black veil. My name was whispered from all directions now, echoing, overlapping, fracturing. I swallowed, forcing my chest to expand, my lungs to fill. The fear clawed at me, insistent, sharp, alive. But still I drove, forward, through the rain, through the endless whispering, through the flickering, impossible shadows. I had no choice. Stopping meant surrender. Surrender meant something worse. I don't know how long I drove like that. Minutes, hours, maybe even days. The storm seemed endless, the shadows infinite, the voices eternal. Every glance at the median revealed new shapes. Every blink brought another whisper. Every heartbeat felt like it might be my last. And as the rain poured, as the shadows flickered and stretched, as my name was whispered in every direction, I understood one terrible truth. I was no longer alone on the road. Not really. Something had joined me. Something patient, something waiting. And it was naming me for a reason I didn't yet understand. I drove on, hands tight on the wheel, eyes forward, every nerve screaming, every instinct screaming. But the voices didn't stop. The shadows didn't stop. And the highway was alive. The rain had slowed to a steady drizzle. But the road ahead remained slick, reflective, and unervingly empty. My windshield wipers moved in a mechanical rhythm, scraping at the water, but it never seemed to be enough. Every puddle mirrored the darkened sky. Every curve of the asphalt seemed endless, and every shadow along the roadside made my stomach tighten. I tried to shake off the lingering dread from last night, the whispered names, the flickering shadows in the median, but it clung to me, a weight I couldn't drop. My phone buzzed in my pocket, vibrating against my leg, and I pulled it out with shaking hands. I hesitated before pressing call. Not for myself. Not yet. But the situation demanded it. The dial tone hummed, a high, piercing note that cut through the quiet of my car. And then, click, the line connected. A voice. Calm, procedural. 911, what's your emergency? I swallowed, my voice tight. I'm not sure if this is an emergency, but I need to report something strange. I'm on Highway 47. There's someone or something. I don't know. And the operator interrupted me. Her tone polite but tense. Sir, calm down. Where are you exactly? I gave a mile marker and tried to explain, but words failed me. How do you describe shadows that move in impossible ways? How do you explain a voice calling your name that isn't human? I hesitated, then pressed on. There's someone stranded on the highway. I don't know how to describe it properly, but I've seen them in multiple places at once, or something like it. Shadows, lights, and the radio, it whispered my name. There was a pause on the line, and then she spoke again, her voice quiet now, but tinged with a strange undertone, as if holding back something. Sir, are you alone? Yes, I said. I've been driving for hours. The highway, it doesn't make sense. I don't know what's happening. The operator inhaled sharply. Sir, you're not going to believe this, but we've had multiple calls tonight. Reports from other drivers, all along Highway 47, all describing the same person, same exact situation. Stranded, moving from one impossible location to another. Calls started coming in just after midnight. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard her correctly. The same person? I whispered. Impossible. I'm right here. This is happening to me. Yes, she said. Her voice dropped to a whisper now, almost conspiratorial. Multiple drivers claiming the same things. Some described shadows, lights, strange reflections in the mirrors, voices calling their names. We've been monitoring the radio traffic and dispatch logs. It's all connected. Every report matches details that shouldn't exist. Locations, times, even weather, all impossible. I gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles white. The rain tapped steadily against the roof, like a slow, deliberate heartbeat. My mind scrambled to process what she was saying. So this isn't just me? It's happening to others? Yes, she confirmed. But no one can reach the person in time. The calls, by the time we respond, the caller is gone. Sometimes the car is found abandoned. Sometimes nothing. We don't understand it. My chest tightened. I could feel a growing panic, a rising sense of something inevitable, and I realized the highway wasn't just strange. It was aware. It was alive in a way I couldn't comprehend. It didn't matter who was driving or when. It claimed moments, memories, and witnesses alike. And tonight, I was a witness. I don't know what to do, I said, voice shaking. I've been trying to keep driving, to keep moving. I don't know if stopping makes it worse, or if moving makes it worse. The operator's voice softened, almost a motherly tone, though it carried a chill beneath it. Sir, whatever you do, do not get out of your car. Do not stop. Highway 47. It doesn't forgive hesitation. We've learned that from previous reports. The road seems to manipulate reality. Drivers report seeing their own reflections. Shadows moving against the wind. Vehicles appearing behind them that weren't there a moment ago. Every driver describes the same phenomena. Every time. I pressed my lips together, trying to steady my breathing. My mind was on overdrive. Every curve of the highway, every darkened stretch, every rain-slicked shoulder suddenly felt alive. The shadows flickering in the median weren't random. The shapes that appeared in my mirrors, fleeting, almost intangible. They were deliberate, and the radio, the static, the whispers, it was a malfunction. It was part of it. What happens if I stop? If I pull over? My voice was barely audible. The operator didn't answer immediately. I could hear the rain on her end, soft static in the background, as if she were weighing her words. Sir, once a driver stops, they often disappear. Or worse, we've had reports of cars found empty, phones still connected, but no sign of the driver. The shadows, the lights, the voices, they seem to isolate anyone who hesitates. The highway collects them. I felt the blood drain from my face. The wheel felt slippery in my hands. My pulse hammered in my ears. I wanted to laugh, scream, cry, all at once, but all I could do was keep my eyes on the road ahead. The median shimmered wetly, shadows flickered, and the rain blurred the edges of everything. I couldn't tell if shapes in the mirrors were my reflection or something else entirely. I don't understand. I whispered. Why me? Why anyone? There was a long silence on the line. Finally, the operator said, her voice low, almost resigned. We don't know, but the reports, it doesn't matter who it is. The highway chooses its witnesses. It's consistent. It doesn't follow logic, only patterns, and it keeps repeating. I swallowed hard, trying to control the rising panic. The lights ahead flickered again, shadows shifting just at the edge of perception. My heart thumped so hard, I thought it would burst. Every instinct screamed to turn, to escape. But where could I go? Every mile marker looked the same. Every curve of the road repeated endlessly, and every shadow seemed closer now. I'm still on the highway, I said, my voice trembling. I don't know how much longer I can keep going. Everything looks the same. The median, the signs, the reflections, is like I'm driving in circles. The operator's voice softened, almost comforting, but still carried that underlying chill. Stay on the road. Keep moving, even if it seems endless. The reports indicate that anyone who stops doesn't return. You may feel trapped, disoriented, but the only chance is forward. Keep your focus on the road. Ignore the voices. Ignore the reflections. Do not stop. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Forward. Always forward. My hands gripped the wheel, like it was my only tether to reality. The shadows flickered, the rain blurred vision, and the whispers carried on. Sometimes overlapping, sometimes harmonizing in strange rhythms. But I forced my eyes to the road, forced my brain to ignore the impossible. And then, through the static on the radio, I heard it again, a faint, almost teasing repetition of my name. Alex, Alex. I wanted to scream. I wanted to slam my foot on the brake. But the operator's words rang in my ears. Forward, forward, forward. The median shimmered again. Shapes bend in ways that shouldn't be possible. Yet they move with almost deliberate intent. The shadows weren't random. They were guiding, testing, marking. The highway wasn't just a stretch of asphalt. It was alive, aware, measuring my fear, feeding on hesitation. I kept driving. Forward, tires slicing through puddles, Windshield streaked with rain. Radio static echoing faint whispers. Every instinct in my body screamed that I should stop, that I should turn around, that I should abandon the car and run into the darkness. But I couldn't. I had to obey the rules, such as they were. I didn't know if anyone else had survived, or if the reports were merely fragments of those who didn't. I didn't know how long I'd been driving, or how far I'd gone. I only knew that the rain, the shadows, the whispers, and the impossible road had marked me, and the dispatcher's warnings were clear. Forward was the only path, even if forward led me deeper into the unknown. I gripped the wheel tighter, forcing my eyes forward, forcing my breathing to steady, forcing my mind to focus. The rain soaked the world. The shadows danced and stretched in the median, and the radio whispered my name. Multiple drivers had called in before me. Multiple people had reported the same phenomena, stranded in impossible locations. And now I understood the highway wasn't random. It was watching, waiting, recording, collecting, and I was part of it. Forward, that was the only choice. Forward through the rain, the shadows, the whispers, the unending stretches of asphalt. Forward to the horror that didn't follow reason, through the dread that didn't pause, through the reality that bent and twisted around me. Forward, because stopping was not an option. The rain had finally eased into a light drizzle, but the air still hung heavy, clinging to my skin, making my hair damp and sticky. The road stretched before me like a black ribbon, gleaming wet under my headlights, yet somehow the curves felt different, longer, tighter, and strangely alive. My hands gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. Every instinct screamed to keep moving forward, but my mind was fraying under the relentless whispering of my name. It was then I saw it, a faint break in the highway, an exit I had never noticed before. No signpost, no marker, just a narrow off-ramp veiled by overhanging branches and slick leaves. My pulse spiked. I wanted to avoid it, to ignore it, but something about that darkened gap felt like a promise. A way out, maybe, or a trap. I slowed, the tires hissing over wet asphalt as I turned cautiously onto the exit. The road narrowed sharply, flanked by dense woods on either side. Every shadow seemed to stretch and twist unnaturally. The whispers were louder here, more insistent. Alex, Alex, they layered over themselves, echoing in stereo from nowhere and everywhere at once. I swallowed, trying to force down my rising panic. My eyes scanned the darkness ahead, searching for a continuation of the road, for any hint that this path led back to safety. But the more I drove, the stranger it became. The road seemed to stretch endlessly, folding over itself, curving back impossibly. It wasn't a road anymore. It was a corridor of black, lined with shadow and rain, and the world outside had disappeared. Then I saw the cars, parked along the sides, neat, silent, perfectly aligned. At first, I thought they were abandoned, relics of a long-forgotten stretch of highway. But as I drew closer, the headlights reflected faces and windows. Faces that didn't move yet held the weight of awareness. People, dozens of them, sitting rigid, staring directly at me, and each mouth open in a whisper, though no sound came out. And then I heard it clearly. My name, Alex, Alex, Alex. Every window, every occupant, repeating it in unison, yet without voices, only a presence. It crawled along my spine, cold and electric. I slammed my hands on the wheel, heart hammering. My car seemed impossibly small, fragile against the weight of all those silent observers. I tried to breathe, tried to tell myself they weren't real, but my own name being used like that, every whisper layered in dread, made rational thought impossible. I slowed further, trying to maneuver past them, but the road seemed to bend around the parked cars. No matter where I went, they were always there, watching, waiting. My headlights caught their eyes, black, reflective, unblinking. Some faces were familiar, but warped, elongated, features stretched in ways that didn't make sense. Others were blurred, smudged, indistinct, yet still perfectly aware. "Keep going," I muttered to myself. My voice sounded foreign, thin, swallowed by the drizzle. My hands shook so violently I had to grip the wheel with both arms just to maintain control. The whispers followed, overlapping, echoing, multiplying. Alex, 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 I tried to accelerate to escape, but the car resisted. It felt heavier, as if the rain itself had congealed into a thick mass around the tires. The road ahead remained empty, no end, no exit. Only more shadows, more parked cars, more silent faces repeating my name. And then I noticed the reflections, not just in the windows, not just in the puddles, but everywhere, in the slick paint of the cars, in the thin sheets of water clinging to leaves, in the faint mist rising from the asphalt. My own reflection, bent, fractured, flickering. Sometimes it looked normal. Sometimes it looked wrong. The eyes staring back weren't always mine. They were wider, darker, and infinitely older. They followed me, accusing, waiting. I pressed the accelerator harder. The car surged, tires spinning, water spraying outward. But the road simply lengthened. More cars appeared, parked impossibly close, more faces staring. Some faces pressed against the windows, impossible angles of neck and jaw, mouths moving soundlessly, repeating, whispering. My name, Alex. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles burned, every nerve in my body screaming. Forward was no longer a choice, it was survival. But survival meant navigating this corridor of shadows, reflections, and whispers that echoed my every fear. The exit I thought was salvation was proving to be a trap, folding space, stretching time, bending reality in ways I couldn't comprehend. And then I heard the other sounds, subtle, beneath the rain, beneath the whispers. Footsteps, soft, deliberate, crunching on wet asphalt, behind me. Though I had turned onto the exit, I checked the mirrors, heart pounding. Nothing, yet I could feel it. A presence, watching, moving in tandem with me, keeping pace, always just outside the edge of perception. I tried to reason, logic, science, anything. But the more I thought, the more the road resisted understanding. My reflection flickered in the side mirror. For a heartbeat, I saw another me, smiling faintly, eyes wide with terror. Then it was gone, replaced by my own tense, white-knuckled face. The parked cars multiplied, emerging from the mist like specters. I counted dozens of silent witnesses, and each mouth moved, lips opening to repeat my name in unison, an unholy chorus of attention and accusation. I slammed the horn in desperation, and the sound echoed unnaturally, bouncing off the trees, the road, the rain, and yet did not startle anyone. They remained, watching, waiting. A sudden flash of movement caught my eye. A figure in the median, too tall, too thin, limbs bending in ways they shouldn't. And it was smiling, not a friendly smile, but one that promised inevitability, that I was already part of this highway, part of its endless game of observation and fear. I turned the wheel sharply, trying to escape the corridor, to force my way back onto the main highway, but the road curved impossibly, wrapping back on itself. Every attempt to leave led me past the same cars, the same faces, the same whispers, and always my name, echoing persistent, inescapable. I tried the radio again, desperation overtaking terror. Maybe if I could get someone, anyone, to hear me. Static, then a voice. Soft, mechanical, distorted. Familiar, yet impossible. Alex, welcome back. I froze. The voice didn't come from the radio, not from the rain, not from the shadows. It came from everywhere inside the car, inside my mind, inside the reflections. My own name, spoken by something older than me, something patient, something that had been waiting. I slammed my hands on the wheel, my vision blurred with tears and rain. Forward was the only option. I drove past the nearest car, its occupants silent, unblinking, and as I passed, I could see their faces change subtly, eyes narrowing, mouths curling into expressions that were human, but deeply wrong. My name was still whispered, still repeated, always repeated. The exit led nowhere. Every path curved back on itself. Every turn revealed the same corridor of parked cars, the same shadows, the same faces, the same whispering. Forward, always forward. And yet, forward led deeper into this impossible loop. I realized, in a hollow moment of clarity, that I had not found an escape at all. The exit had been a lure, The parked cars, the faces, the whispers, they were all part of it. The highway, this stretch of asphalt, rain, and shadow, it was alive. And it fed on recognition, on attention, on fear. It wanted me to notice, to acknowledge, to exist. And I had. My hands ached, my chest burned, my mind frayed at the edges. But I couldn't stop. Not yet. Not ever. Because stopping meant surrender. And surrender meant joining the silent chorus in the parked cars, repeating my name until it no longer belonged to me. I gripped the wheel tighter. Forward. Always forward. Tires slicing through the wet asphalt. Headlights catching reflections that were not mine. Mirrors holding impossible truths. The rain fell steadily, lightly now, yet it didn't wash away the terror. It only carried it, bending it, reflecting it, amplifying it.